What's good, y'all?
What's good, y'all? Happy Saturday.
What's
How
happening?
you guys doing?
We're doing all right.
Welcome, everybody. Give everyone a little second.
Yep.
I know we...
Yes.
Hope everybody's had a good work week. It's Sunday now. Some of you are just starting your weekend. Some of you are just ending it.
Yeah, some permanently. Some of you are laid off because of
That as well.
increasing social conditions.
But we are glad that you come hang out with us.
Yeah. Yeah, there's doom and gloom here, but we're fun, at least. Sometimes.
Speaking of, let's get a cool notification on our screen right now. Because I just subscribed to my Twitch Prime, and if you if you have an Amazon Prime account, feel free to subscribe. It's completely free to use. As long as you link your Amazon to your Twitch account. Woo!
Yeah, unless you do not have one for some reason, and if that is the case, wait till we have a donate button if you want to give us money.
Don't waste your money. Don't waste your $5 a month on something that Jeff Bezos is going to take. Or News Corp is going to take.
Soon to be News Corp. Yeah, we're soon to be owned by News Corp. So I believe. Do we want to silent up for a minute and go with the little?
Yeah, we're gonna give you guys a cold open into the show with
that was my bad. I meant to.
No, we're good. This gives everyone an opportunity to get in and stuff.
Yeah.
Get comfortable. We're gonna start right from here. So.
Yep.
Let's do it.
The other representative said that you can actually show up and vote without an ID. It's shocking. How can you allow that to happen? Like, a lot of people think all Indians look alike. I think all Chinese look alike. So how would you tell? If some Chow shows up, you can be anybody and you can vote. And if somebody with my name, you can't even tell my name. Anybody can vote on my behalf. So ID should be the basic requirement.
Yikes, bro.
Some Chow is her words. If you need context, that is last video we played, and she was with Giuliani. It was part of Trump's court team to try to win this stolen election, but that didn't work out well. And now you have before it was a drunk lady, now you have just people being openly racist, saying that all Asians look alike. So how do we know how to count votes? And other ridiculous shit. So you love to see it.
I just think there are no requirements to vote. You just say, I am this person. Now let me vote for them.
Right. And all these hedgelings, all these people we've seen making these ridiculous scenes in these courts. Of course, their headmaster right now is Rudy Giuliani, which, if no one's heard,
your boy just got COVID.
Your boy got COVID. Finally, it took him long enough.
After leaking fucking sulfur from his forehead.
if it doesn't kill Giuliani, they already have the cure. I'm telling you.
Not only that, it was definitely made in a lab in the United States. Because it only kills people that don't have money.
How does Chris Christie not die? That man is so fat.
How does Bolsonaro not fucking die? He's got like 7 times.
Yeah. You got Chris Christie, who's a fat fucking lard. You got was it Chuck Grassley got it? He's like 80 something.
A shit ton of
Yeah, so the fact that it hasn't even
it didn't take out Trump's old ass.
Yeah, forget kill. Like it didn't even fucking seem to affect any of them that bad. So
they got pumped with that Regeneron, baby.
Yeah, look at the value of adequate healthcare. Yeah. So,
I mean,
fuck all these people.
Look what happened to fucking Trump. He literally went to like a socialized hospital and got insane healthcare.
Right. Yeah. The experimental treatment, the whole nine.
He got Regeneron, which is stem cells, which is something that Republicans hate, but he'll gladly take.
Right.
Yeah, just a huge hypocrite.
But yeah, we can leave it at that, and we might have a fast pace, so everyone kind of keep with us. We have a lot here, so it's juicy.
Yeah, tonight's a banger night.
Yeah.
So it's been a big news week. So yeah, getting back into
our first piece.
Yeah. So for our locals here who live in Oxnard, California, we are getting a new police chief, sadly. So we have this Instagram post from the Oxnard study. Huge shout out to them. We pretty much shout them out all the time because they're fucking awesome. They do a shit ton of organizing on the ground here in Oxnard, as well as Venturing, the 805. So reading just from this post, OBD is going to have a new police chief. He is Jason Benitez. I'm really not sure how to pronounce that. And he has been OPD's assistant chief since 2006. He's been on the force for 27 years, meaning he's overseen the killing of Alfonso Limon Jr., Megan Hockaday, and many others. Meaning, with all these terrible things that have happened in our community, he has done absolutely nothing to stand up for the extrajudicial killings of our very own citizens here in the 805. So you can already kind of get a glimpse of what he's going to do while he's police chief.
Virtually all the big ones, too, that we have name recognition,
Yeah.
Limon that was part of the protest in downtown. Hockaday, her sister spoke. So, like, some of the worst fucking things that police have done here, this guy has been a part of that.
Yeah. Continuing on, he has also experienced bringing the FBI, the real feds, into our city, our Oxnard, for gang enforcement. Not addressing what causes gangs to do things like, commit crime, but rather just lock them up, throw them in jail. Don't even give them a chance to exist in our society. We just got to lock them up and then exploit them for labor. Which can only mean more surveillance and police presence in working class communities. Very true. And racially profiling, especially. Benitez, or Benites, is a big advocate for community policing. But this is just another way that police can have more surveillance and protection of private property. These are the same people who defended the pedophile and exploiter of women, Alonzo of Alonzo's Cheesecakes, who Oxnard study led huge protests, shutting his business down very quickly and getting him the fuck out of our city. We don't stand up for that shit here. We also know this is true. The Ventura County Sheriffs are installing ALPR cameras to spy on the working class. This is something that they also did a thing on. So yeah, make sure you go check out Oxnard Study. I'm gonna go ahead and plug them in our chat right now. I'm gonna go ahead and plug their Instagram, which is what we were reading from. It is at OXREV Study for those who are doing audio only. We will have all the episodes that we've ever recorded on SoundCloud once we get done editing them and whatnot. But that will be there.
Yeah, plenty of Christmas gifts for you guys. So.
Yes, we're gonna leave you guys with some bangers, and then as Carl.
That's him there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's him right there. Yeah. So
I haven't heard. Just to go on like a quick side tangent, I haven't heard anything from like the police office yet or anything like what they've said, but it is funny. Like we've covered this now multiple times. The whole national discussion right now is Joe Biden. Now that he's going to be president, he's fucking putting all these war hawks, war criminals, fucking financial criminals in under the guise of, hey, they're minorities. And now we got a guy that's going to be our fucking police chief, and I assume he's of some like Latinx background, and he's replacing Scott Whitney, a white guy, and they're going to be like, hey, that's improvement, that's change.
Yeah, even though we're going to get the same bullshit and possibly even more of a crackdown on our black and brown communities.
Right.
Because his big thing when he was a detective in the police force was working with the FBI to crack down on gangs.
Right. So now more Fed stuff in here is just they're even less accountable than the police are. At least the police live in our community.
Exactly.
Usually.
But when the feds roll up, they don't live anywhere near here. They're gonna roll up. They're gonna lock up our brothers and sisters and then get the fuck out.
No remorse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember even in one of our classes back at VC, one of the students there had a lot of issues with some of the police officers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely a lot of anti-police sentiment out here just from the way the police treat people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fuck Officer Nunez.
But it is, just to like put a little tag on it, it's like this thing happening locally is what's happening in this whole country, and it's just we're using this identity politics blanket to be like this is change, but it's not.
Yeah, no, we're changing the face, but the beast is the same.
Yes.
And the beast is this oppressive capitalist system that we exist under globally.
Yeah, we're putting black faces and Latinx faces, brown faces. We're putting that on the face of empire and calling that fucking representation.
Moving on, another thing that really this isn't about Oxnard, but something that touches very close to what the people here in Oxnard talk about a lot is gentrification in small cities and gentrification of historic landmarks. And so we have this piece here from Liberation News, if we want to get that pulled up. Here from Liberation News, historic Harriet Tubman House demolished in Boston's South End to make way for luxury condos, which is fucking disgusting. Starting off at the top of the article. A mound of bricks and twisted steel are all that remains of the Harriet Tubman House. The historic community hub for Black and working class Bostonians in the South End neighborhood was demolished in November to make way for luxury condos. The Harriet Tubman House was a fixture in Black Boston since 1908, and in its most recent location since 1975. In 1904, 6 Black women, including one of Tubman's friends, Julia O. Henson, rented the first Harriet Tubman House at 37 Holyoke Street in the South End to provide shelter to other Black women who had recently moved from the South. Since then, the Tubman House served as refuge for its communities by offering services such as job training programs, adult education, senior programs, childcare, art exhibitions, and much more. Every day, neighbors gathered in the lobby to socialize, read news, and relax in a safe, welcoming environment. The Harriet Tubman House also housed 6 nonprofits that served the local community, all of which are now displaced from the neighborhood due to the sale and demolition, which is fucking disgusting. You have this place that not only is a historical landmark, but also does so much for the local community, the local, Black and brown working forces, and even the disenfranchised and poor whites. This is a place that was not only built a long time ago and is now a historic landmark, but is also used to support the community that it exists in. And private and profit hungry business came in and has now destroyed that.
Yeah, I think if anything, that's probably more of a motive than the historical significance of it, of why they removed it. Like they're willing to keep a historic landmark up, but the fact that they were using it to actually create change.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Provide for people. They're like, yeah, can't have that.
And that historic, it provides more change or importance than any luxury apartment, like anything, like
exactly.
That's going to do that.
Yeah, it doesn't make someone money.
And what we're going to get into in a second is, what are these luxury condos doing for the people that live in these communities? The Harriet Tubman House sale by nonprofit United South End Settlements, which I tried to do a deep dive into, and they're very I couldn't find much I know that they did get bought. They got bought out by somebody. I don't remember who, but it will continue anyway. United South End settlements took place within the context of rapidly gentrifying South End. In 1980, even after the damage of urban renewal, 39% of South End residents were Black. By 2015, the figure had decreased to 12%. So more than fucking half of the Black population in the South End was displaced due to gentrification.
And make no mistake, that's done on purpose.
Done 100% on purpose, and there was absolutely, no rehabilitation. They are, who knows what happened to these people? They were not helped when they were kicked out of like the communities that they grew up in. The administration that assumed control of USES or uses United South End settlements, which is funny. It's called uses, and they're now gentrifying. It's just like a funny little something like we're gonna get into later with the whole FEE thing. In 2015, allowed the house to deteriorate to later justify its sale to luxury condo developer New Boston Ventures for almost $13.5 million. So when this place was bought out or assumed control of, they let it just run to the ground, did no repairs, which gave them more reason to be like, oh, we have to sell it now. Which is, again, disgusting. And
just
then
look at that picture. For those that can't see, that the picture just shows the parts of the house demolished. There's a mural of a bunch of it looks like a bunch of influential Black and revolutionaries.
I also think this is morally wrong as well. It's
absolutely it's morally wrong.
There's no moral precedent to this.
Yeah.
No, and they're rooting these people out on purpose because, like Ian said, it wasn't just providing, reflection on their community and their history, but also an active place for organizing.
Yeah, and then I think this is we're gonna get into a really gross part here. USES refused to fundraise for the house, even eliminating income from Zipcar and an ATM branch, and cut all programs for adults, including seniors, while spending down their endowment and generously compensating their leadership team. Uses also hired a public relations firm to spin and exaggerate their self-inflicted plight. An examination of tax records revealed that the organization had misrepresented its financial status. Uses could have sold the house to another nonprofit to keep this irreplaceable hub in community hands, and in fact received bids that would have been both accomplished that aim and earned more money than the deal that they got with the luxury condo people. So nonprofits who wanted to keep this place and continue to help the community offered more money than the luxury condos. And
it's even beyond money.
Now they're just scum.
It's beyond money. It's doing deals.
It's destroying the organizing in that community so that they can make future money.
It's those smoke-filled backdoor backroom deals. That's what it is.
Wine caves.
Exactly. Instead, they chose New Boston Ventures after it made many contributions to elected officials and so-called community leaders. After receiving the contributions, these officials either remained silent in the face of the vociferous protests or endorsed the condo plans. New Boston Ventures chief of operations became the Boston mayor, Marty Walsh's chief of staff, in March 2020, after making contributions to him. So you can already see the puzzle pieces fitting into place. Somebody who works for New Boston Ventures used our disgusting, corrupt political system and the revolving door to get it in to become the Boston mayor's chief of staff, and was just contributing, feeding him this, feeding him that, being like, let's do this deal, let's fuck over these people, let's not let them to organize. And I'll just read a little bit more, and then we'll move on because we have a big show. But where were we? Oh yeah, affordable for who? While users in New Boston Ventures boast that the development project will generously contain 17% affordable housing, the cheapest of those units is a 745 square foot one bedroom, would sell for almost $200,000, $186,400 to be exact. Considering that the median net worth of Black families in Boston is $8, it is clear this project will only accelerate the South End's gentrification. If luxury developments continue to dominate in the neighborhood, there may no longer be a working class community for nonprofits like Uses to pretend to serve. And then I'll just read the two more paragraphs. The last one we don't really need to read. But on December 12th, 2019, the Boston Planning and Development Agency lifted their own urban renewal restrictions on the property to permit luxury housing on site. BPDA, Boston Planning and Development Agency, will receive 4% of each condo sale and 2% of the resales. Clearly, the BPDA, along with users and the city government, were looking out for their own interests, not those of the community members, whose fierce opposition took the form of street protests and a 60,000 signature strong online petition. Sadly, the thing about petitions, when you're not in a democratic system, petitions kind of don't do anything, which is sad because you have 60,000 people in or out of the community showing solidarity with these people and really pointing out that this is not only a morally wrong thing to do, but just wrong for the working class. And sadly, like I just said, when you're not in a democratic system that works, petitions kind of don't really do anything.
Yeah, and to be fair to them too, like their backs are against the wall too. Like their means of organizing, literally the place where they were doing it was destroyed. So
100%. The place where they went to organize, talk politics, talk news, get their aid that they needed was gone, or it's gone now. And then the last paragraph I'll read. The community-wide struggle began in 2019 with the Black women-led I Am Harriet coalition, which members of the Party for Socialism and Liberation Boston branch joined that summer. The coalition organized a number of demonstration rallies in hopes to build a mass movement strong enough to save the house. One coalition member and a lifelong South End resident told Liberation News, "The greed and deception of USCS, the city, and the developers stole this community's last piece of Black history." So this is what all the neoliberal shit of POC, this and that Joe Biden and the Joe Biden administration pushes is bullshit. This is what real POC, grassroots organization looks like. This is what Black and brown phases actually look like. This isn't what his economic development team looks like. This isn't what his foreign policy team looks like, where it's just a bunch of shills that happen to be women, that happen to be Black, et cetera, that are just going to continue to fuck us over. This is what this actually looks like. From the straight up grassroots, people from the South End, from the community, standing up against not only the state but the private sector and saying, "Fuck you! You're not going to destroy our community."
For the community's interest.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, the POC appointees of Joe Biden are only can relate in terms of like their own identity, but they can't relate at all to people and identity of like experience. These people have actually experienced what it's like to be Black in America.
Exactly.
And that's why they're radicalized in this way.
And not these rich spoon-fed people that were pretty much raised from birth to be DC wonks. Right. Excuse me. And yeah, we can move on from that. And I thought it was something we could touch on because it's so close to home.
Yeah.
That's something that exists so close to home.
Right. But before we go into the video, to hammer that point home, because you prefaced it early, like, oh, this is related to home too. Like, think just our own wagon wheel, for example. That was a historical landmark that had no chance of, immediately got ripped out, and they built literally luxury. They claimed the same thing. They were going to build low-income apartments, and that makes up a small percentage of the entire thing they built.
Yeah, when I was younger, that's why I wanted to learn how to swim.
My grandpa worked at Wagon Wheel, and they had to fire him because they said, "Hey, we're closing down. We're gonna demolish this place. Like, it'll soon be demolished." But at the time, over time, it took time for it to get knocked down.
Right, and that was there since
his job because of it,
like the 40s, the 50s, or something.
Right.
So, I mean,
and before we move on, just like something to think about, like, what that does when like stunting, like intergenerational wealth for smaller households and families of color. That's like another angle. Like you're stunting this accumulation of wealth at the bottom and then continuing to give it to the people at the top.
Yeah, it's just people who don't support big business.
Yeah, like in our local example, like that collection wagon wheel area. what does that accumulate? Has that gained resources for us, for minority communities? No.
Look at it. We have Target, Whole Food.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
Apartments.
Yeah, they're
overpriced fucking apartments. We have no rent control. Like, what
the
is
only jobs they're offering there are not? They're not offering like salary jobs or anything.
Yeah, exactly. You have minimum wage jobs from big corporations. You have like big names like Five Guys and stuff like that. Like, our shitty politicians allow these corporations to come in and extract our labor in return for minimum wage, unlivable wages. And what did we get? We don't have rent control still. We don't have any type of health care. We don't have any sort of unionization. Nothing. They came into our community and are exploiting us currently. And our politicians, our elected officials, are allowing this to happen.
We have a Red Robin and a Whole Foods though.
Yeah.
At least we got that.
We're getting a Cane's, but I'm not gonna have health care.
Yeah. So. always ask who benefits.
Exactly.
So yeah, let's move on from that. And we just have two more things here, and then we'll kick it into a break. But LeBron did an interview recently, and we don't venture into sports too much, but rarely does LeBron do an interview. And he actually did speak on the NBA strikes and kind of what happened from his perspective. Obviously, you got to take what he's saying with a grain of salt, because you got to know his perspective and how, as we covered, Obama stepped in and convinced these players that continuing the strike wasn't the right thing to do, and that they should make these basic symbolic gestures for Black Lives Matter, but no actual change, really. So yeah, this video it at least pulls the curtain back a little bit. I thought it was interesting. Good, we could start it.
Yeah. Actually playing, I believe, game 3. I believe it was game 3 versus Portland that night, the last game. So it was Milwaukee, Orlando, followed by Houston, OKC, and then we were the later game. And so I was taking my nap, and when I get up from my nap, I get treatment with Mike, and I'm sitting on my couch, and I turn on the TV to start watching the Milwaukee Orlando game. And as soon as I turn on the TV, there's nobody on the court, but the game was supposed to start like 20 minutes ago. So I'm like, what the hell is going on? So this is before I even go to my phone or anything. So as soon as I wake up, I'm start doing that, and they say Milwaukee refuses to come on the court. So I started getting calls and phone calls and things of that nature, and this was still up in the air if they were going to play. No one knew what was going on because, frankly, even the Magic didn't know, what was going on. So the whole league was caught by surprise. So we were just sitting there and wondering what was going on, and as the time went on, basically they said Milwaukee was not going to play. They had made a decision to boycott the game because of what happened in their backyard back in Milwaukee with another innocent black man being gunned down. So I got on the phone with Chris Paul because their game was next. And I called him and Russ, and I told them straight up that there's no way that we can go out on the floor as the Lakers and play our game with what just transpired. What are you guys going to do? And they felt the same way. They was like, we need to get all the information of what's going on because there's still some things that's not been checked off. But we would look stupid if we went out and played, and Milwaukee decided to sit down, and we've been, preaching this solidarity thing as a brotherhood, because we are a brotherhood, even when you get blindsided from your brother.
That's the question, is that, again, like all the people that know all the guys, like what was that?
It's basically like you then come together in that room, and the one thing that comes out of that room is LeBron James gets up and leaves. That's the one thing that comes out.
No, of course. Of course that's going to.
Of course it does.
If it was LeBron comes in his room and the last thing he sat out, they would have said that. So.
But in the moment, did you doubt?
Did you sit down last?
Well, what, Channing?
Did you sit down last?
No, I did not.
No, but I'm saying,
well, just checking. That would have been a bad
obviously, hindsight is 20/20. That's not it. But they made a decision, and as brothers, I understand.
Right.
And formerly being a part of the Brotherhood, I understood that like whatever they were going to do, you were going to support.
Yeah, you were going to support.
But that was such a big, powerful move that it's like shooting a text to the Players Association, shooting a text to, you know, Chris Paul, like the guys that are the president, the vice president, shooting a text like, hey guys, this is what we're thinking about doing, but we need to make sure that we are unified as a group. That was the one thing that, not to be critical, but could have caused some issues.
Yeah. And I mean, as players, we felt the same way. We felt like, you know, we're not against what you guys were standing for, because we've all felt it too.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, when it hits in your backyard, you feel a little bit more. But, you know, when we're all together, you know, as an army, you know, if we're an army and we're going out for battle and we say we're here in solidarity, and someone in the front decides to go before we say charge. Now we're all caught off guard.
Yeah.
Leroy Jenkins.
So we can posit that for now. So there's two things I took away from this mostly, and it's that because they have, like, Chris Paul, for example, he's like the president of the Players Association, and the NBA claims to have, like, you know, this system where the players work together to strike, or not strike, but they could take collective action, right? Mm-hmm. And this whole kind of story proves not only they don't have any means to do that, because when this situation came along, it was all spontaneity, and they weren't ready to do something like this. But also, like, look at the difference in instinct between, even though these players are fucking millionaires, just by their experience and the lives they've lived for the most part, like, look at their fucking initial idea of coming together in solidarity, regardless of what the Bucks were going to do, even though they weren't prepared, versus what Obama's mindset coming in was, and then changing it more or less was, and stopping it. Like, yeah, their instincts were good and they did the correct thing.
Yeah, you know, you have these people
not having organization.
Exactly, like they come from these communities, they know how it is, and you have somebody like Obama who was basically raised from birth to be the president. You know,
was the right correct when they said Obama's the Antichrist?
Damn demon rats!
I hate to admit it.
For listeners, even, I mean, Obama is the specific example, but it's like, just look at the, you know, of course, NBA players, they are a distinct category because these guys are, you know, mega millionaires now, but they do think of themselves as workers. And in a way, that is their mindset. And that's how they grew up also, because they grew up in low income, working class communities. So look at the difference look at the difference in their mindset though, versus like the political and elite class that got them not to do the strikes.
Yeah. What it seemed like their whole thing was like, you know, just solidarity with their brothers. Something happened in their backyard, so they're gonna, you know, stand in solidarity. And then you have these figures like Obama, who, you know, don't come from these communities, as well as has been trained to continue to oppress these communities, come in and say, here, with my malicious intent, let me tell you what to do.
Right.
And sadly, you know, they succumb to Obama, and they continue to play the games, and, you know, receive nothing in exchange.
Right. And later in the video, we don't have to watch it, but he touches on it too, is like when they went in for those discussions after they had begun the strike, his complaint was, well, hours and hours and we had got nothing done, right? Mm-hmm. And thus Obama comes in and does like let's get something done, and that's like just symbolic shit.
Yeah.
But with the way he said it was like, in that moment though, what they meant by get nothing done was not that players didn't have an idea of what they wanted to do and weren't motivated and understanding in their solidarity. It's the owners. The owners were stalling. They didn't want shit to happen. And yeah, they were waiting for
exactly. And even though even though they have this players association, they still didn't have the infrastructure necessary to organize and figure out what they wanted to do as a collective.
Because of those owners.
Exactly.
Yeah, they make sure those player associations and stuff aren't going to be worth anything. Yeah, we can move on from that though, and just to tie it in before we hit our break, just talking about workers and striking in general in our last show. Indian farmers on their big strike, and as we know, on the 8th, the trucker union will also join in, and they're gonna do a giant nationwide strike.
Yeah, and this is gonna shut down like huge amounts of everything traveling around the country. So
right. Well, so them being a still very agricultural society too. They're all their farmers and all their truck drivers stopping is huge.
Yeah, I mean, and as we talked about in the last episode, like this isn't only just stopping food; it's stopping things like medicine as well.
Right.
So they're completely willing to put everything on hold to defend the rights of their workers, which is beautiful. And you have an update here from Al Jazeera.
Yeah. This is a piece from yesterday, and just some updates before we get into that next coming strike. It says here from Al Jazeera, Indian farmers vow to intensify protests after talks fail again. Protesting farmers say there will be a nationwide strike if the government does not repeal controversial new agricultural laws. The Indian government and protesting farmers were unable to break their deadlock in talks, with the farmers saying on Saturday they will intensify their demonstrations against new agricultural laws and continue blocking key highways on the outskirts of the capital. Protest leaders rejected the government's offer to amend some contentious provisions of the new farm laws, which deregulate crop pricing, and stuck to the demand for total repeal, which is cool to see. They're not getting sold on like any half measures by Modi's government. They're still stuck for complete repeal.
Mm.
They also announced a nationwide strike for Tuesday. That's the 8th. They said they would intensify their agitation and occupy toll plazas across the country on the strike day if the government didn't abolish the laws. The two sides will meet for further discussion on Wednesday. Thousands of farmers are protesting against reforms that they say could devastate crop prices and reduce their earnings, which we covered, and that's because it's going to be private interests that are going to come in there and take these public lands that are owned to the farmers and different trade unions and the poor, quite frankly. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government insists the reforms will benefit farmers. It says they will allow farmers to market their produce and boost production through private investment. But farmers say they were never consulted. Of course not. Saturday's talks between Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar and 35 farmer leaders were the 5th since the laws were passed in September. So, and that was kind of the point of this piece, is when I read a little more, is prior to the strike that we're familiar with, this has been a months ongoing thing. And even prior to September, of course, the COVID lockdowns that they had, which was used to justify, police repression.
Yeah.
I really like this quote here. Let's see. It says it will allow farmers to market their produce and boost production through private investment.
Yeah.
Not they'll get more. And then they'll have a better standard out.
Well, of course they will.
They'll be making more. They'll be producing more.
The rest of it, they were never consulted. So of course they weren't gonna fucking.
And the big thing they've all complained about is that it's gonna push prices down and it's gonna make their food worthless, and they can't produce that much of it.
Exactly.
And only the largest businesses will be able to stay afloat, and that's what the race to the bottom is all about.
And something positive to look at from what you just read is the next talk is on Wednesday, and that's the day after the truckers are supposed to go on protest. They're going to have, if this all comes to fruition, they're going to have, huge leverage, because they're going to literally have the country by the balls. Like, they're literally going to be able to, we have the truckers on our side, we have the farmers, etc., etc. Nothing in India will move until you repeal these laws and whatever else that they are going to negotiate for. So I think it's something very interesting to look forward to. And continue if you didn't want to add anything else.
Yeah, just a little bit. If we can go towards this growing resentment, and then we'll start from the second paragraph. And this was what Carlos was kind of touching on. It says, with nearly 60% of the Indian population depending on agriculture for their livelihoods, the growing farmer rebellion has rattled Modi's administration and allies. Modi and his leaders have also tried to allay farmers' fears about the new laws while also dismissing their concerns. Some of his party leaders have called the farmers, quote, misguided and, quote, anti-national, which is an insane thing to say, when, as the figure we covered, almost 200 million people are protesting? How can you call something anti-national when it's the fucking entire nation protesting?
And also, to put that even into larger terms, that's 3.3% of the world population is literally striking because of these 3 terrible laws.
So that's beyond saying. Are you saying it's anti-international? Because it's almost it's a whole percent of the world population. But yeah, it's ridiculous. Carlos is right. It's a race to the bottom, and these private interests and corporate powers, international national corporate powers, their whole point is to get into these countries, fucking privatize all the industries, all the public lands, suck them dry, push everyone into poverty, because that's how it is. Wealth can't exist without fucking poverty. It's just what it is.
And the world that we exist in America and places like Europe and the European Union can't exist without the exploitation of what we consider to be the third world. Yes. And just as the title of our episode is, we commonly refer to these places as underdeveloped, and it's important to understand that these are not underdeveloped countries or nations. These are overexploited by people like the United States and other colonial powers such as France and Portugal and Great Britain, etc., etc. These countries could very well not only be thriving, but be more advanced than us if we didn't, as white imperialists come in and torture these people, rape these people, pillage these people's villages, and exploit their people for labor to make our countries better.
Yeah, their countries are rich. Their people are just poor because we make them poor.
Exactly.
Right, and they're just as important as us. In
absolutely.
Well.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in our way of, this international solidarity that we try to support here in the show. You guys want to hit our first break so we can get to our next half here?
Yeah, so we're going to go into our first break. Thank you guys for everybody who's rocking with us. If you're watching without an account, really quick before we go, please create an account, drop a follow if you like what you see, and also turn on notifications so you never miss a show. We're here every Wednesday and Sunday at 10:30. And we'll be back after this break.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
It's simple, I've been here before.
And we're back.
And we're back.
What's good, y'all? Good to see 10 of you rocking with us.
Happy
We just get their water.
Let's give a minute. We'll just jump straight into it.
I've been leaking the last song that we were gonna use because I keep forgetting to set it on replay. So that's why I cut to you guys real quick.
The man behind the curtain. All right. Well, while we're packed here, let's fucking go. Let's open the first article.
I am our dark money donor. I'll never tell you where I get these bits, but I give bits.
So on the it's good to see. We've covered this many times. Just sanctions, fucking coups. You name it against Venezuela has been happening lately. And now we actually see, as we've seen across Latin America, some real wins. We finally get to see one in Venezuela. And it also signals a much larger move too, which seems to be not just the removal of imperialism and U.S. influence in Venezuela, but Latin America at large. So if we can pull up this popular resistance article, and it will give you some background first, and then I'll tell you what's happening, what happened today, and will be happening in the next week regarding Venezuela. This is from Margaret Flowers. It says here, Venezuela votes to end neocolonialism, creates his own path. On December 2nd, the Embassy Protection Collective, EPC members, who were arrested in May 2019 when the United States illegally invaded the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C., completed their probation, ending the risk of the 30 days in prison that was being held over their heads, all of which, may I just point out, is completely unjustified and draconian. I am, back to the article, I am one of the 4 who were arrested. Sadly, Kevin Zeese, another member and the co-director of Popular Resistance, died unexpectedly in September. For the past 18 months, those who were arrested on May 16th had to check in regularly with the federal government and required permission from the judge, who had a clear disdain for the defendants, to travel. The 3 who remain marked their freedom this week by traveling on December 3rd to Venezuela to serve as official international election observers, invited by the National Electoral Council. Travel to Venezuela is challenging at the moment due to the United States' illegal economic blockade. The election, which will be held on December 6th, and which is held, that was the thing I was saying, the great news, they're finally holding real elections. That was today, and it's going to be, falling out the next week because it's huge. They have a lot of people being elected. This election on December 6th is for a new National Assembly. To prepare for observation, the EPC members and others from the United States and Canada, who are also official observers, received training to understand the election process. They also met with members of the right-wing opposition and left-wing critics to better understand the political context. An official report will be filed after the election, and my interviews with several people who are knowledgeable about the historical and current politics will be available this Tuesday. So we'll be coming back to this story in the future also.
Yes.
The current situation in Venezuela is dire for many people. The United States has been interfering in Venezuela affairs for decades. Prior to the Bolivarian Revolution, which was solidified with the election of Hugo Chavez in 1998, someone that we tried to assassinate, keep in mind, Venezuela was the greatest ally of the U.S. in Latin America. The alliance served U.S. corporate interests well. There was a small class of Venezuelans who were extremely wealthy because of it, while the vast majority of the people lived in poverty. Since Chavez took office, and then continuing during the Maduro administration, there has been an effort called the Bolivarian process to put the people's interests over those of the corporations by using the nation's resources for social good. Obviously, this is, by nationalizing these various industries. The first step was the creation of a people's constitution through a participatory process that codified rights to healthcare, housing, education, and more, including the right to vote. The socialist Venezuelan government worked to end poverty and has nearly eradicated illiteracy, which is a trait specifically fucking specifically, socialism specifically eradicates illiteracy. If you look at any fucking socialist country, one of the first things they do is eradicate literacy and drive literacy from like nothing to 90+%.
Look at Cuba,
Venezuela, any of these countries, China even. It's insane. The government built hospitals, they built schools, free or low-cost housing. They built electrical, water, and transportation infrastructure to serve poor people whose existence was not acknowledged in the past. The people have been working to build participatory democracy from the ground up through local community assemblies and regional communes composed of these local assemblies. You don't hear about that when people talk about Venezuela, do you? You just hear about how they're eating rats.
You hear Vuvuzela eating rats. Socialism bad, Vuvuzela.
You don't hear about all these strides that have been made it's because they're strides that have been made for the poor people, not the fucking rich.
I think the last thing I heard about Venezuela is that everyone was dead. So
Right.
It was so bad that no one survived.
Everybody died.
And that was on, I think, Fox News.
Yeah, at least once. In the article here, it says, for this, the United States and its allies in Latin America and the European Union have been waging a hybrid war against Venezuela, which intensified under the Trump administration. And we expect, this is not from the article, we should not expect it to not intensify under Biden. I think it's just going to be more of the same.
Well, yeah, more of the same, or like
if not worse,
or potentially even more hawkish.
It'll probably be under the guise of a humanitarian effort. He'll probably say that they're dying.
Right.
They're dying. We need to save them.
We can skip to that last paragraph before the picture, where this is from Caracas in Venezuela, where you see painted on the walls of the embassy here. It's "No Trump, Venezuela indestructible." In the article here, it says, though, the Venezuelan government is pursuing legal avenues to stop the deadly economic war through a lawsuit filed in the International Criminal Court that charges the United States of crimes against humanity because the sanctions are a form of collective punishment. Venezuela is fighting the British courts for access to its $1.2 billion in gold being held in the Bank of London. The government plans to use that to buy food and medicine, which are crucial during the COVID-19 pandemic. And recently, the Venezuelan United Nations ambassador, Samuel Moncada, called on the UN General Assembly to take action to stop the economic war being waged against Venezuela and many countries around the world. And this is later in the article, but I'll pull this from another popular resistance article just to give you an idea about this the National Assembly that's having elections. It says, according to the Constitution, on January 5th, 2021, a new National Assembly must take office, ending the mandate of prior members who did not successfully bid for re-election. As we know, Juan Guaido, who the U.S. has supported as, quote, interim president, will no longer be an elected official and can no longer claim Venezuela's government or, more importantly, its assets. That is why the U.S. refuses to recognize the legitimacy of this election, pressures allies into doing the same, and effectively prevents part of Venezuela's opposition from participating. Nonetheless, Venezuelans will carry out the parliamentary elections as an exercise of national sovereignty in the hopes that a new National Assembly can engage in concrete actions to circumvent the blockade. It goes on further here, and this is why this election will take a while too. This will be Venezuela's 25th electoral process in 21 years. That's a lot of democracy in only 21 years. The new National Assembly will have an increased number of seats to reflect population growth from 165 to 277 members. Over 14,000 candidates of all political tendencies will be competing. Out of the 107 political organizations contending the elections, 98 define themselves as opposition. Yet they have split with the more extremist sector led by Guaido by participating in the election, refusing to support unconstitutional attempts to change the government, and by rejecting the illegal U.S. sanctions, in air quotes, aimed at coercing the Venezuelan president into resigning or propelling the military to overthrow him. So this is an interesting development for a couple reasons. Both, you're seeing this increase in just general democracy in Venezuela. Even the further left to Maduro, the people that are advocating for redistribution of wealth, and there's even groups that they're making the argument like, hey, yeah, we do need to nationalize our resources, but hey, we got to understand climate change too and its effect on the poor. So that left is getting more of a say. And we also have, even in these right figures, before the right in Venezuela, as we know, is like, hey, we're supporting the U.S. We support the sanctions. We're not even going to participate in an election. Now the right, the furthest right they have, they're being kowtowed to at least, they at least have to participate in the elections.
Yeah, they're
not calling for sanctions anymore. They don't want the U.S. to interfere.
Yeah, because
it's good.
They're like the farthest right is at least being pulled to like, okay, at least we're a sovereign nation.
Yeah, they don't just want the U.S. to fucking do a military coup.
Yeah, and
that's only been enabled by the left and everything they've done, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah, and something I want to bring up before we move on really quick about Guaido, which I think isn't talked about enough when talking about Guaido, is he was the whole like the interim president, et cetera, and one of the first things he did after the whole like fake diplomacy coup thing was like, while in the United States, courting to Israel, saying, we're going to stand in solidarity with Israel and we're going to send aid to Israel. I think that's I don't know. I think it's something interesting to keep in mind when remembering Guaido.
Yeah, well, and they even touched on it. Like, there's this whole class of Venezuelans that have, this elite class of Venezuelans like Juan Guaido that have been purely created just to propagate U.S. imperialism in that country.
Yeah,
and they even said it like one of the first things Guaido also did was immediately just call for all the pausing of national assets in Venezuela, because it's obvious he wants them to be, scooped up by international private corporations and shit, rather than the people of Venezuela. So, but yeah, solidarity to the people of Venezuela. Finally, good to see something. We always cover shit going wrong there because of all the horrible stuff we do to them. But we've had a recent good string of news in Latin America, so here's another one. Carlos, you had a video that I think quite a few of us saw that is really interesting.
It's made the rounds.
It's making it in the national conversation.
Finally, some good came out of a man interrupting a news broadcast. And hopefully this happens more often and people try to bring attention to real important issues affecting them and affecting everyone. So
yeah,
I'll go ahead and get it playing.
A federal judge is refusing to overturn Michigan's highly controversial ban on indoor dining. This as COVID-19 infection rates and fatality rates continue to surge statewide.
This, of course, follows the lawsuit brought on by the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association. News Channel 3's Tavarius Haywood joins us live in Portage with the details on why the judge said no.
Here on this Café?
Tavarius, is everything okay?
Okay. Our government leaders have abandoned me.
Are you the owner?
$4 trillion of stimulus money. They gave it to who? Special interest groups and campaign donors. I'm Dave Morse. I own the place.
So what's going on?
What's going on? You know what's going on.
Tell me. You tell me.
Hey, we got a government that has taken the stimulus money. They gave it to special campaign donors. They gave it to special interests. They abandoned me, and they have put me in a position where I have to fight back. Okay?
So do you feel that this is the right thing to do?
Absolutely. I feel everybody needs to stand up. Hey, listen, there was enough money to give every family in this country $20,000 to go home for 2 months. They chose to give it to special interests and campaign donors, the Kennedy Space Center, and they abandoned us. So you could have given me money. I'd gladly walk away for 60 days and let this virus settle down. I'm not going to do it alone. Okay?
Are you going to continue to violate the state's orders and stay open?
This is a state order. This isn't an order. This is a conspiracy. This is a tyranny.
What do you want to tell other restaurant owners?
Wake up. Stand up. This is America. Be free. I got patriots coming out supporting me the last 2 days. You know what? It's a great thing. Wake up, this is America. Don't let them ramrod you. This is crazy.
See, it takes a little bit of a tailspin.
You watch what's going on West Beach Avenue. The big department stores, the train station, the airports, side by side eating meals for 4 hours. And you're going to blame me? Come on. Come on. This is not right, and you guys know it. Everybody knows it. Stand up, America. Give us the money to shut this thing down and calm this virus, but don't take it out on a select few.
Is there anything else you want to add, sir?
That's it, brother.
All right.
I'm glad you listened to me. Thank you.
Well,
hey, I'm really
the
a
entire
humorous
West
guy.
Michigan just listened to you. You're live on TV right now.
All right, I'm glad to hear that, okay?
Yes,
I'm really
sir.
a good...
And so, yeah, even though he's definitely probably, he might not be on our side politically, but it's, these are real issues that affect people.
Yes.
And he still gets it.
Well, what he mentioned there was how they're not equally enforcing the like social distancing and what businesses have to shut down.
Exactly.
They're forcing small businesses to shut down like for no reason almost.
But big retail can stay open.
Yeah. Even like Amazon. And they don't only fulfill essential needs.
Exactly.
Right. And to people that might be like, grinding their teeth to the part where it kind of spins out of control there and he starts, maybe saying a couple things you might not agree with. Keep in mind, like, I think people, honestly, because he gets it and he understands he's being screwed over economically, but people get driven, especially here in the United States, get driven into these different conspiratorial thinking and different, conspiracies. Because there is no means for which they can, put their politics. We talk about it all the time, like a means for them to express their politics. So for this guy, he's facing the material condition of, hey, my business is shutting down. I have no money. They're shutting me down, but they're not shutting these giant businesses down. I can't afford to not shut down. Who are the people that are coming out and coming to my business? Anti-mask people, right? These conspiratorial, that's the only conglomerate, the only social cohesion they have. It kind of reminds me of like, even though this is a weird thing to compare it to, like in places like Palestine, where there's like mass unemployment, there's fucking murder every day, you see war crimes. People turn to fucking Islam because it's all they have in their lives, praying 5 times. It's the only structure you have in your life. It's the only people that will reach out to you and give you some idea of social cohesion.
At least try to care about you.
At least try. Exactly. And it's our job as socialists, I think, and as working class people to build an organization and build, these movements and not reject these people. These people are on our side.
You can't reject anyone who's honestly
That's our whole
cares.
thing. That's our whole thing with the show is these people can't. We're all about change. These people can change. Some people, yes,
absolutely.
Some people are just off the rail, too far gone. But a lot of these people that you see, if you sit down with them and you talk to them like a normal person, you can change these people's minds. These people,
yes.
It's not a bunch of psycho. This guy gets it. If you sit down with this person and you explain to them, the material conditions that be, you explain to them who exactly is screwing them over, they'll fit in the puzzle piece.
They'll get it. Yeah,
they already get most of this stuff. It's just they're missing a couple.
Right
They're just politically incoherent because our country is politically incoherent.
Exactly.
There's no way for these people to, So all they have to do is lash out and these He's like he starts perfect. He's like, look, they could have gave every family $20,000 to stay home. Instead, they gave it to special interests. And then he goes, the Kennedy Space Center. It's like, okay, that has nothing to, that's beyond. They're driven to these ways of thinking because there's no means for them to actually, fucking voice their politics. Which is, hey, I want money. My business is shutting down. I gotta live.
And something we're gonna get into in a second. Our government isn't here to solve our problems. It's here to understand our problems.
Yes. Does anyone have any like final thoughts on the video before we move to this another popular resistance?
We just got to be more open-minded with people and not,
especially
stick to what you believe in and like be willing to stand your ground in your beliefs. But I mean, don't just hate people because they think differently.
Understand why they came to these conclusions.
Hate systems. Be kind to people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a little bit of education can make a big difference.
Hate can't drive out hate. Only love can.
Absolutely. Right. The one teaching of Jesus we might take, but someone else might not take. We'll get into that later too.
Yeah.
There'll be. But let's pull up that popular resistance article, and if you could hold it on that image at the top while I read this real quick. It says Congress is deadlocked on COVID-19 relief. The above photo. Hospital staff look on as the United States Navy Blue Angels pass over Medical City, Dallas on May 6, 2020 in Dallas, Texas. So it's a perfect, if you just want it all in an image, there it is there. There's where all of our money is in the air, and then what it's not paying for is there on the ground.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this article lays it out great, too. From the article, it says, there's always money for war. The annual approval of the gargantuan U.S. military budget is one of the most reliable rituals in Congress. It is so ordinary and overwhelmingly bipartisan. It's barely considered newsworthy, and few outlets follow the details of exactly how much the government is allocating to a nuclear weapons buildup, or deployments to the Asian Pacific, or the steady creep of the U.S. military bases across the continent of Africa. Even under President Trump, when the Democratic leadership claims to have struck a more confrontational posture, those same leaders, Nancy Pelosi, etc., have repeatedly handed him bloated military budgets, as we saw Wednesday with Congress's bicameral approval of a roughly $740 billion military budget for 2021. It is really only Trump's threats to veto the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, most recently, over his objections to some liability protections for social media companies that cut through the noise. When that does happen, the headlines often look like this one from ABC News. It says, quote, Trump's veto threat on must-pass defense bill meets GOP resistance, unquote. Otherwise, quote, objective ABC News has no problem randomly editorializing about the essentialness of the Pentagon budget. A search for ABC News archives reveals no such, quote, most pass modifier for child health care, housing relief, or COVID-related relief. This is no ordinary year. As Congress races to pass the NDAA for 2021, it does so in a country that is hurtling towards months that could be among, quote, the most difficult in the public health history of this nation, unquote. And I would argue probably just the history of this nation. The most difficult history of this nation. According to Dr. Robert Redfield, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, along with this health crisis, whose scale in the United States was entirely preventable, comes economic devastation. Lines for food banks are stretching for miles, and according to one study, 1 in 6 people is food insecure. As of September, 1 in 6 adults said they live in a house that's behind on rent. The nearly $3 trillion in stimulus spending so far has come from bills passed in March and April, including the CARES Act, which together combined corporate bailouts and tax breaks for the wealthy with measures that, while insufficient, provided at least some genuine relief, including expanded unemployment insurance and $1,200 checks. But without a new relief package, roughly 12 million people are poised to lose their unemployment benefits at the end of this year, and federal protections against evictions, which have been grossly insufficient and significantly walked back, and deferment of student loan payments are also set to expire. While there are some reports of renewed discussion of COVID relief, there have been little meaningful movement, and there's a good chance that stalled negotiations will bring unfathomable levels of economic devastation to tens of millions of people. And yeah, we can speculate on that now because this Sunday, and I'm sure many other people are experiencing it. Now we're shutting down outdoor dining as well as indoor dining in our county.
Yep.
So that a bunch, anyone that has like a serving job is unemployed instantly as of now in our, and my mom has a friend that owns a hair salon, and, I go and get my hair cut there and stuff. And earlier in the year, when they had first done the shutdown, she had to do all these new things to open back up, right? Mm-hmm. Spend a bunch of money to like basically revamp her place, do a bunch of stuff. They're redoing these lockdowns now, and she can't afford it, right? Not only will she lose the place, but she'll lose her place of living too. All of her income.
Yeah.
So like many other people, they're being forced right now, and I've heard this not just from my mom's friend, but other people too. They're going to put up black curtains on their place so it looks like they're closed, and they're going to, text people, and that's how they're going to show up. It's all going to be, backdoor. So we're not preventing any, spread or anything. We're just forcing people to now do, sketchy shit like this, and possibly risk maybe like fines even if they get caught. Who knows what transpires. But my point bringing that up is they're not going to, I don't see any new relief coming. We're already hitting a new lockdown right now with a bunch of unemployment that's going to happen, and unemployment looks to expire, and they're not doing anything. If they're going to do something, you'd think it'd happen now, but no.
No, yeah, we've been just, since the beginning of the pandemic, and, even, post CARES Act, we've just been in this constant, state of, downward spiral. Like, our government's not helping us out. Cases are only rising. We're breaking records literally every day. And
right.
And now we're in the middle of holiday season. We're post Thanksgiving, we're coming up on Christmas. We're only going to see, from what the statistics show, we're only going to see larger spikes.
Yeah, and we're about to hit a huge wall in general.
And the biggest issue is lack of economic help from our government. Our businesses are unable to properly close when they have to close. They're unable to stay open because of lack of economic stimulus. Those who are unemployed can't stay home because they're not making money. How are they going to pay their rent? There's no moratorium on mortgages and rents. The rent's not paused. People's waters are getting turned off if you're not lucky enough to live in a handful of states like California, where it's illegal to turn water off only during this COVID pandemic. These are real.
But even here, the unemployment's going to run out at the end of this month, pretty much.
Exactly. And after that, the start of the Joe Biden presidency, we're most likely not going to get shit because we're still going to be in this fucking deadlock.
Well, maybe we can look to what Joe Biden's saying and see what their response is, and maybe they are. Maybe they'll do something.
Yeah, let's.
Is there a way we can?
Couple of days.
Wait, Michael. Yeah, before we play this video.
I was just gonna say, even if they did give us another measly $1,200, it ain't gonna be shit, dude. Like, that's not enough to support us for our rent, for our resources, for our basic needs to here to survive.
$1,200 isn't even rent in most places.
Yeah,
right.
Healthcare.
That's a fraction of people's rent, and that's like nothing for mortgage payments, including bills, car payments, etc. Like, we have this consumer society, and we're doing nothing to fuel it currently when we're getting fucked.
Right. Good point though, Matt. Like even the stimulus they're willing to give us is not enough. So it's insane to see where we are now, where they're not even willing to give us that measly amount right now. They're just like, hey, fuck you guys.
Instead of giving us little to nothing, they rather just give us fucking nothing.
Yeah, they need to go real big with whatever bill they're doing and give actual relief to people, not to some middleman who may or may not get it to them in some reasonable amount of time. Like,
every
these
person
people are
gets $1
going
million
underwater
cash
right now.
and a brick of Coke.
These
we
people
could do it.
They're deciding whether to go out of business like right now. This is like a majority of small businesses. Like, do I try to stay open, or do I just forget it?
Yes, we're hitting that wall.
Yeah,
there's there's such a large amount of stuff that we can do, but we just refuse to do just because profit, right?
Yes,
for our government. It's ridiculous.
Well, let's see what Joe Biden has to say, though.
Yeah.
Let's listen to Robinette.
A couple of days ago, I spoke with a school crossing guard, a server, a restaurant owner, and a stagehand. Good people, honorable people, decent, hard-working Americans from across the country. It reminded me of my dad, who lost his job in Scranton and eventually moved our family to Delaware, just outside of Wilmington, a place called Claymont. He used to say, you've heard me say it before, Joey, I don't expect the government to solve my problems, but I expect them at least to understand my problems. The folks I'm talking about, the folks out there aren't looking for a handout. They just need help. They're in trouble through no fault
a handout
of
with
their
help,
own.
you fuck.
What is
Give
that?
me my money.
They did.
Yeah, well, yeah. What the fuck does that even mean?
Cause them to have hours cut or lose their job or drop out of the market.
So give them money.
What they need us to understand. We're in a crisis.
You piece of shit.
We need to come together as a nation.
What they need.
We need the Congress to act.
Understand.
And act now.
Listen. They don't need money.
Congress and President Trump failed to act by the end of December.
Do they act by
12
understanding?
million Americans will lose their unemployment benefits they rely on. Merry Christmas. The unemployment benefits allowing them to keep food on the table, to keep the lights on and the heat on, pay their bills. Emergency paid leave will end. The moratorium on evictions will expire.
Can we pause it for a second, Carlos?
States.
It's just here's the difference with Joe Biden. They're willing to tell you that yes, there is a crisis happening, and yes, all of you guys will be unemployed. Yes, you will have no health insurance. Yes, your life sucks. Yada yada yada. But are we gonna help you? Nah. No. We understand.
We'll understand you, but we
so they're almost in a way. Now, I'm not going to use the word worse than Trump, but it's worse in its own way. Like Trump,
because it's so in your face.
Well, they're at least acknowledging there's a problem and that the shit is about to hit the fan, and then they're just like, "But we're not going to help you." At least Trump's just like, "Hey, there's not a problem. Everything's going. Yeah, Merry Christmas."
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, he's fucking. They don't need handouts. They need help. What does that even mean? What is help and what is a handout?
Right.
There are people literally dying. There are people going homeless. There are people that can't afford their medicine, can't pay their rent, can't keep their heat on in the dead of winter. They can't have their water on in certain states. We need economic stimulus and not corporate bailouts. The people need money, not the corporations. The corporations can. The corporations with their profits they'll be good forever. We're dying if we don't pay our rent. We're going homeless if we don't pay our rent. People are going to be sleeping outside in the dead of winter in Buffalo, New York, where there's record cold temps, and they're going to be dying. And this is the reality of the situation. And you have neoliberal shill Joe Biden who's saying shit like, we're going to understand your problems, but we're not going to fucking help you. We're going to leave you out to fucking die and then use you as a Trump is a meanie for a couple more years until the fucking stupid liberal Hollywood circle welcomes him back in with open arms, gives him a show, puts him on the fucking View a couple of times, and he's gonna be right back in the mainstream, and we're gonna forget he fucked this country up, just like we did with George Bush, just like we did with Bill Clinton, and all the modern American presidents.
He did have a pretty good black unemployment rate, though. If I'm
lowest black unemployment rate.
They'll be saying that.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
And yeah, no,
you're bullshit, by the way.
You're right though. Like his fucking when he says handout, what he means is an economic stimulus, giving people money, giving normal people money. Where was Joe Biden fucking 6-8 months ago? Was he calling it a handout when we gave billions of dollars to Boeing and all these other fucking companies for bail? He wasn't calling it a fucking handout. He wasn't saying shit. But now that normal people get a couple grand maybe, and that's not even on the table yet, he's going to call that shit a handout?
And was he calling it a handout after the 2008 crash when he was dumping money into corporations' pockets? Was that a handout?
He was part of that. That was him.
He was right there with Obama, giving away our money to corporations and leaving us out in the fucking dirt.
We handed out a bunch of casino chips to the gamblers.
Yeah.
That's what Joe Biden's all about. And never forget that. Never think he's anything more than what he actually
They call that economic stimulus. Give money to the rich. You mean the thing that you said was economic stimulus every time for the past 50 years, and it wasn't?
Right, but it wasn't, yeah. When I saw this, it just instantly broke my brain. Like, I couldn't...
I saw you tweeting about it.
Just the instant... They're just willing to say to you, we know there's a problem. We understand your plight, but that's all they're willing to say. We only understand. There's only platitudes. There is nothing there. It's that hollow.
Look at the stock market under
We understand,
Obama.
but we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Up.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I guess that's all I have to say about that.
And then you're totally right, Jose. At least Mitch McConnell will tell you that he likes corporations more than people.
Yeah, so we know he's our enemy.
Yeah. The problem is you have, hapless liberals who are kind of only getting into politics, or still relatively apolitical, who see the Democratic Party as their saviors. They see them as these people who actually want to effect change rather than just use change as a platitude. And then they will, fall into that, DNC machine and even go as far as to criticize the left and the socialists who want to affect this change. Actually, they don't care about the platitudes. All they care about is the policy. Somebody, who was running in California in our district, Allison Hartson, she was, relentlessly smeared by not only liberals, but as well as conservatives, because, what her big thing was, politics over, policy over politics.
Right.
Cut the bullshit. Let's actually help people. And, that's our whole thing.
Yeah, man. I miss her.
Me too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, now that
she gave hope.
Still.
She was hope.
Yeah.
We need
her and Delaney Easton.
We need more people like her.
Right.
Yeah.
And Delaney Easton.
Continuing on with the show after that little Joseph Robinette diatribe, we have this video, another video here from the Gorell Institute. If you remember, we've done a segment on them before. They're super awesome. They've started doing an animated series as a way to combat PragerU. And so this is super awesome. It's a really cool video, and we're gonna go ahead and get into it. 6 minutes, and let's start it up.
This is a long episode, so I hope everyone's ready.
Yeah,
can we actually for this video, just for right now, can we just have just the video, not the cameras?
Yeah.
All right.
Because there's a lot of infographics and whatnot.
What came first? Illegal immigration or the wall? The U.S.-Mexico border is the most militarized border in the world, with the exception of the Korean DMZ. There are over 700 miles of fencing, patrolled by 20,000 Border Patrol agents. Each year, American taxpayers spend over $4.8 billion on Border Patrol and another $8.4 billion on immigrations and custom enforcement. Is our southern border really worth all the money and taxes we're pouring into it? Hello, I'm Dr. Douglas Massey. I'm a professor of sociology and public affairs at Princeton University. I've been the director of the Mexican Migration Project since 1982. I've been collecting real-time data on what's going on at the border, and none of the conclusions I've reached, to my knowledge, have ever been challenged by anyone. What many Americans might not realize is just how new all of this border security is. In the early years of our republic, there was no firm border line, only a fuzzy western frontier. As the frontier pushed westward, the border between America and its neighbors continued to be blurred. When the southern border was finalized in the mid-1800s, it was still soft and porous, an invisible line on a map that ran through the middle of towns and even houses. In the early 1900s, labor shortages led many American farmers to begin recruiting field workers from Mexico. The work was seasonal, though, with workers coming from Mexico for the planting and harvest, and then returning to Mexico for the off-seasons. Because they only stayed for the harvest, Mexican workers were not considered immigrants and weren't included in early immigration laws that put quotas on other nations. The U.S. Border Patrol was established in 1924 not to prevent the entry of Mexicans, but to catch Europeans who were trying to get around the quotas at Ellis Island. During the Second World War, the U.S. government actually encouraged migration through a temporary worker program. The Bracero program was created in 1942 and steadily expanded after the war ended. By the late 1950s, it was recruiting around 450,000 Mexicans per year for temporary labor in the United States. Everything changed in 1965 when the Bracero program was ended and numerical limits were put on Mexican immigration for the first time. Almost overnight, Mexico went from having access to around 500,000 legal visas to less than 20,000 permanent resident visas and no work visas. But the demand for agricultural labor didn't go away, and what was now unauthorized or illegal migration rose to fill the gap left by the end of the Bracero program. Border apprehensions went from 40,000 a year in 1965 to over 1.6 million in 1986. However, these were still seasonal workers, and the flow was still circular, with 86% of undocumented workers returning home at the end of the season. In practical terms, little had changed in the Mexican-American migration system, but in symbolic terms, much had changed. For now, the majority of migrants were illegal, and thus, by definition, considered to be criminals and lawbreakers. While the demand for seasonal agricultural work stayed the same, what the government did was criminalize its workers. Reacting to this perceived change, the U.S. government began pouring more and more resources into the Border Patrol. From 1986 to 2010, the number of uniformed Border Patrol officers increased 5.6 times. The agency's budget grew by a factor of 17, and hundreds of miles of walls and fencing were constructed around ports of entry. None of the extra border security did anything to stop border crossings. During the 1970s and 80s, the odds of a migrant being apprehended while crossing the border was about 1 in 3. As more resources were poured into the Border Patrol, migrants began crossing in more and more remote parts of the border, and the odds of a migrant being apprehended actually went down for a while. The diversion of border crossings into remote areas lowered the odds of apprehension, but it also increased the risk of injury and even death. For in addition to being less populated and less patrolled, these desolate areas were also more dangerous. Between 1993 and 2010, the number of deaths along the border skyrocketed. Coyotes and other smugglers moved in to capitalize on the new black market, and border crossing became much more expensive. In the 2 decades after 1993, the cost of hiring a coyote to cross the border increased by a factor of 4.6 in real terms. But the biggest impact of increased border security was that for the first time in the history of Mexican-American migration, the movement of migrants stopped being circular, finding it increasingly difficult and dangerous and expensive to move back and forth across the border for seasonal work. Migrants began staying in America during the off-seasons. As men stayed longer north of the border, they were increasingly joined by wives and children, transitioning from a seasonal migrant flow to a permanently settled population. In other words, the effect of restrictive immigration and border policies was the creation of an undocumented population. Removing the Bracero program made a traditional migratory system illegal. Building walls on the southern border didn't keep people out, but rather trapped them in. Since 2007, the number of undocumented migrants in the United States has actually declined, not because of the efforts of Border Patrol, but rather because of an unrelated shift in Mexican migration patterns. In the last 15 years, more people have moved from the U.S. to Mexico than from Mexico to the United States. This shift was started by the 2008 recession, but has been continued by a change in Mexico's age demographics. People tend to migrate when they're younger. If they do not move before the age of 30, they're very unlikely to move at all. In the last 50 years, Mexico's fertility rate has dropped from 7.2 children per woman to 2.1 children per woman, and the median age of the Mexican population has gone from 16.7 to 29.3, turning Mexico into an aging country. New undocumented immigrants in recent years have come not from Mexico, but from other countries. Today, most undocumented immigrants enter the United States legally. They enter as tourists and overstay their visas. Border security doesn't affect them. And yet still, to this day, there are calls to increase Border Patrol staffing and to build more barriers and to strengthen our borders. Why? No matter which way you stand on the issue, there are better ways to address undocumented migration than a largely symbolic, totally ineffective, and extremely expensive border wall.
Yeah, so awesome video here by the Gravel Institute. Very informative and really shits on the whole idea of the border wall as well as what people perceive to be the issues that is illegal immigration. Big air quotes on that one.
Right. Yeah, I think he wrapped it up pretty well there at the end, but earlier when he was talking about how because of this, it has driven up migrant deaths based on, they've had to travel more difficult routes to get here. it made me remember maybe like a year or two ago, there was a human rights group. A bunch of its members were getting sued, and they went to court because they left out water bottles and stuff for those migrants out in the desert so that they didn't starve or die of thirst.
Mm-hmm.
And those human rights group members were sued for doing that, for trying to prevent people from dying. So it just made those deaths completely preventable.
Of course.
And done on purpose by the U.S. government.
To continue to make the conditions of coming here more and more brutal in hopes, at least from the minds of the fucking disgusting people that do this, in hopes to make crossing the border to come here less like tantalizing or like
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting what he said at the end was that the borders will become symbolic, if not already, creating this just.
Well, think now, now we have a huge border. People don't really know, but we have a huge border wall already that was built by George Bush, and it fucking does nothing. There's miles of fence, and it does absolutely nothing.
And he already pointed out, literally, most people who come here, illegally, big air quotes again. I don't like using that fucking word because there's no humans legal, but people who come over here, they come on legal visas and just overstay.
Right.
So this wall literally is ineffective because the overwhelming majority of people that come here and are undocumented just come here, through the legal channels, perfectly normal. Like they just come to visit and then just overstay. Then that's it.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say from like a labor perspective too. It seems like with that whole bracero tradition and the working visas, it seems pretty clear that the government, removed that and made it more difficult for people to come here and more risky, so that they could just drive up cheap labor. And because those farmers were getting more rights as that process went on, and now they're still immigrating here, but now they have, fucking no rights, no job security, and now they could just be uber exploited.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's gross. Yeah. That was a great video, though.
Yeah, it was a really good video. Everybody check out the Caile Institute. They're awesome.
Now let's watch a shit video.
Yeah, so this video, this is a PragerU video. Prefacing, PragerU is terrible. They're disgusting. They do nothing but lie and try to fill your minds with bullshit to make you more and more conservative by the day.
You mean
they're quite literally funded. We should just call them Coke U because they're quite literally funded by the Koch brothers.
Yeah, it's literally just oil money. Oil money U.
Yeah, bigoil.com.
Yeah. So what we want to do with this video, is basically just shit on it and make fun of them, and then kind of in a way debunk some of the points that they bring up.
Kind of almost use it as a little comparison between the Caile Institute and PragerU,
right?
Because
they
see themselves as like an honest alternative.
Yeah, and then that as well. It's just also kind of maybe challenge some ideas you may hold, as well as prepare you with the tools to challenge friends or relatives that maybe share these views.
Do we really got to watch this whole thing? This is like Steven Crowder, kind of.
Oh yeah. But this is at least this. The difference between this and Steven Crowder is this is funny though.
Okay, I'm sorry, Michael. I kind of screwed this up here. So.
I can tell.
I see.
What happened? Did you get moved?
There's a cardboard Michael.
Oh, cardboard Michael.
So.
It's like the second time this popped
for some
up.
reason. Okay, here, I'll get rid of it.
Wait, it's like Herobrine and fucking.
Okay.
We're just gonna start sneaking cardboard Michaels everywhere.
Was Jesus a socialist? Well, if socialism is nothing more than being kind to other people, then you might think the answer is yes.
Yes.
But you could be kind to other people and be a capitalist.
No.
John D. Rockefeller probably gave away more money than anyone in human history.
Yes. Pause
really quickly. John Rockefeller is a terrible, terrible human being. him giving away money to charity means absolutely fucking dog shit. When, for example, John Rockefeller funded both sides of World War I, funded the Nazis while also funding us. He's a terrible person. He also, the Cleveland Massacre.
Yeah, keep in mind the contrast to his like estimated net worth too at the time was like fucking insane, like $40 billion, probably more than that, even like $100 billion. So this is like when Jeff Bezos.
I think he was in the over hundreds of billions.
Because at one point he owned basically all the oil companies.
Yeah. So not only was he did he basically have a monopoly on the world's oil refining, he also, which is something I didn't know, he controlled majority of copper trusts, smelting trusts, large swaths of the tobacco industries. He also had a lot of influence in other industries such as the United Steel Corporations and our railroads and our banks as well.
Basically, every major industry in industrial America, he owned all of.
Yes,
and this guy's claiming $10 billion is a significant amount of money for him to give to charities. Keep in mind and Carlson and I know this because we had someone we know did a presentation on John D. Rockefeller as like a charitable businessman, and a lot of that money he gave to different schools, but really only he claimed he was giving them to schools to like help out black kids in low income communities. One of those schools, for example, Chicago, he gave big money to, which with the excuse of helping out kids in the hood. But the reality is, as we all know, Chicago is like one of the biggest fucking capitalist propagators out there. Chicago gave birth to Milton Friedman, for God's sakes.
But yeah, this guy is literally he used his philanthropy.
Not Jesus. Jesus would say this guy would go to hell.
Yeah, but yeah, John Rockefeller like literally was a Nazi collaborator. So huge fucking piece of garbage. And this is the first example of
fund Germany to establish Nazi power.
Exactly, and this is the first thing PragerU says is an example of a kind capitalist. So let's continue.
And he was certainly a capitalist. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have given away millions, too. To get an accurate answer to our question, we need to define socialism.
Yes.
Socialism is the concentration of power into the hands of government elites to achieve the following purposes: central planning of the economy and the radical redistribution of wealth. Jesus never called for that.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the New Testament does he advocate for the government to punish the rich or even to use tax money to help the poor. Nor does he promote the ideas of state ownership of businesses or central planning of the economy.
You're right.
In Luke 12, Jesus is confronted by a man who wants him to redistribute wealth. "Master," the man says to Jesus, "tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replies, "Man, who made me a judge or divider over you?" And then he rebukes the man for being envious of his sibling.
Oh, pause.
How about Jesus's?
So it's funny how he did that. The conversation that he's talking about is one about envy, not about a redistribution of wealth. So it's almost like he just made something up on the fly to fit his worldview. Also, it's funny that he continues to leave out the whole healing of the lepers, and
any general story where he fucking appears the massive loaves of bread or anything like that.
Yeah, but you also got to remember, Jesus once said that, sorry, I can't help you. You have pre-existing conditions, so you have to pay.
Yeah.
He was like,
you got to pay for my miracles.
Yeah, he's like, oh, yeah, you have this pre-existing condition. You have to pay me before I can help you. And he also compared buying healthcare to buying a couch. Is another thing that Jesus did very often.
for these people, these evangelicals that claim they're like, always, hey, if you're going to use the Bible, quote it, look to the Bible. Maybe for the most part, all the like analogies and stories he uses here, he never once directly quotes, and he completely fudges like every story. So great.
Yeah, you can continue.
Parable of the talents. Talents were a form of money in Jesus' day. A man entrusted 3 of his workers with his wealth. The 2 who invested the money and made a profit were praised, and the one who buried his share so he wouldn't lose any of it was reprimanded. Sounds a lot more like an endorsement for capitalism than socialism, doesn't it?
Pause really
yes,
quick.
Jesus spoke of...
And also, what he just talked about right now is quite literally a sin. So to charge interest on money you loan somebody is called usury, and that is a sin in Christianity and Islam, and also I believe in every other major religion besides Judaism.
Yeah, it's explicitly outlawed.
Yeah.
Catholicism even fucking outlaws it, which is, of course, it's all biblical traditions, but yeah.
So to charge interest on the money you loan somebody is quite literally a sin, and there he quickly slips in that Jesus would be an advocate for that, and also praised them for that. Also, something that is not often talked about, and I just learned today, is it is part of like the Christian tradition to forgive all your debts every 7 years. It's
that
so
might
this
be a future topic we can dip into, is just like the history of debt forgiveness. That'd be really interesting. Because we were talking about that before. Like, there's a long history, like 1,000+ year history of debt forgiveness in all kinds of societies.
Mm-hmm. And we can continue really quick.
What is it, just me, or does Jesus, other than not having red eyes, look super baked right here?
He also looks incredibly white here, which is typical.
Yeah, what a coincidence.
Very not real Jesus, but yeah.
Yeah, Jesus from the Fertile Crescent was this pale, I'm sure.
The difficulty for a rich man to enter heaven, but not because having money is evil. It's not money, rather it is the love of money, the New Testament tells us, that leads to evil.
That's interesting.
Jesus was warning us not to put acquisition of money and material possessions above our spiritual and moral lives. Was Jesus promoting a socialist model when he kicked the money changers out of the temple in Jerusalem?
No capitalism.
Again, the answer is no.
Morality,
note the location where the incident occurred. It was in the holiest of places, God's house. Jesus was not angry at buying and selling in and of themselves. He was angry that these things happened in a house of prayer. He never drove a money changer from a marketplace.
So even regardless of the biblical verse itself, which I'm going to read right now, it's just the fact that he's saying that, but like, as we all know, the church is like one of the most corrupt fucking pro-capitalist institutions on this planet. And he's saying like, oh, Jesus said you still have to do it there. It's like, you guys do that shit all the time. And even his own foundation that he said, the foundation of economic, what was it, fucking enterprise or whatever, fucking some stupid name. That whole thing is all tied into that. But here's the verse. This is Jesus at the temple. It says, this is from the New International Version. Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. It is written, he called to them, my house will be called a house of prayer, for you are making it a den of robbers. The blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the teachers of the law saw the wonderful things he did, and the children shouting, they started shouting in the temple courts, Hosanna to the Son of David. They were indignant. So yeah, it's more than that's where they congregated. These are the money changers, the usurpers, the usurers, exactly. Mm-hmm. And Jesus overturns the tables. He doesn't read the verse after where the lame and the sick come and he heals them. We don't see that in capitalist countries.
Exactly. It's obvious they weren't good, honest people.
We see the first part. We see the institutions being used and abused to exploit people. But of course, we don't see the latter, where this supposedly free market system heals the people.
No, absolutely not.
And we'll never see that because it's all facade.
Jesus literally thought like this is like almost the worst thing that could be happening.
The one we skipped over too, where he said, he just claims, okay, it's hard for the rich to get into the kingdom of God. and they claim it's evil. And he goes, no, they actually don't claim it's evil. Well, here you have this New International Version also. This is the title of the chapter. The Rich in the Kingdom of God. And then a man came up to Jesus and asked, quote, Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life? Jesus says, why do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments. Jesus then lists the commandments. And then he goes on, and then the man says, quote, all these I have kept, the young man said. Quote, what do I still lack? Jesus answered, and this part, Prager, you will never fucking say, quote, if you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and then you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. When the young man heard this, he went away sad, because he had great wealth. Then Jesus said to his disciples, truly, I tell you, it is hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. So, yeah, obviously, there's plenty of shit stuff in the Bible, and there's plenty of stuff that's left to interpretation, but I don't get how you read that and
looks like this guy's going to heaven.
Yeah, this guy's going to heaven, or how is Jesus endorsing capitalism in any of that? Especially when he says to give up all your worldly possessions and give to the poor. Like, give me a fucking break. Yeah. But yeah, let's just go back.
Or from a bank. Jesus advises us to be of generous spirit, to show kindness, to assist the widow and the orphan. But he clearly means this to be our responsibility, not the government's. Consider Jesus.
Because none of us are the government. No one's responsible for anything.
And something I didn't point out earlier when he defined socialism is he gave a very loaded and super wrong version of what socialism is. Socialism is not a collection of power of government elites that decide how the planned economy goes. It is it is a democratized system where the people are truly they own the means of production. They decide what goes on in the economy. They plan the economy. It's not just. Yeah, it's not.
Nowhere does he touch on socialism is about giving normal people the means of fucking production and giving them the ability to centrally plan an economy around normal people with our. Nowhere is he going to say that. You're right, though. That's his whole thing. Is this whole thing, any egalitarian thing done by Jesus in the Bible, here is going to be painted as, oh, well, that's a charity thing that only you personally do. Mm-hmm. And anything that he would define as socialist is only restricted to government does. And anytime government does something bad.
Isn't it funny? He equates it as like something you can't hold it towards others as like a standard.
Right. Exactly. That's why his entire thing doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Let's let some of these last shitty arguments play out.
A traveler comes upon a man at the side of a road. The man had been beaten and robbed and left half dead. What did the traveler, the Good Samaritan, do? He helps the unfortunate man on the spot with his own resources. Ask yourself, to help the poor, would Jesus prefer that you give your money freely to the Salvation Army, for example, or have it taxed by politicians to fund a welfare bureaucracy?
God.
Progressives like to point out that Jesus said,
because Jesus
render
didn't want
unto
any
Caesar
sort of
the
welfare.
things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. But that has absolutely nothing to do with high taxes or wealth redistribution. It was the seed for the idea of separating church and state.
Oh, do you support that?
It certainly wasn't the same to say that whatever Caesar says is his must then be so, no matter how much he demands or what he intends to use it for. So there is no evidence that Jesus was a socialist, and there's lots of evidence that he supported free markets. In addition to the parable of the talents, Jesus offers his parable of the workers in the vineyard. In it, a landowner hires some laborers to pick grapes. Near the end of the day, he realizes he needs more workers to get the job done. To recruit them, he agrees to pay a full day's wage for just 1 hour of work. When one of the laborers who had worked an entire day complains, the landowner answers, "I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money?
Don't I have the
That's
right
a
to
testament to the
fuck you
principles of supply and demand, of private
This owner
property,
of this-
and of
He
voluntary
never
contracts.
talks about how he
not
owns that
socialism.
giant vineyard, and none of those
Jesus
workers
never
own any part
endorsed
of that giant
the
vineyard.
forced redistribution of wealth.
Uh,
That idea
Yeah, really quick. He said just in the last slide, like Jesus endorsed like voluntary contracts. Under a capitalist system, there is no such thing as a voluntary contract because your basic necessities are not taken care of. At the very minimum, you have to work some type of job to survive. Because without a job, you cannot feed yourself, you cannot get water, you cannot have a home, nothing. You cannot exist under capitalism without exchanging your labor and having your labor exploited, I should say. So the idea of a voluntary contract under capitalism is silly and insane because there truly is no ethical consumption under a capitalist system because somebody at no matter what point in this whole game is somebody not being exploited.
It's funny. He's just looking for Jesus to say he supported forced redistribution of wealth, which of course you're not going to find that. But how, in just the two verses I read with the overturning of the money changers and him saying give up all your possessions, how is that in any way an endorsement of fucking capitalism?
Yeah. What kind of reading are you doing?
That's way more endorsement of not forced redistribution of wealth, but a actual redistribution of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I got a better way to phrase that dichotomy at the end. The owner is claiming, "Don't I know what's best to do with my money?" And the workers would rightly say, "No."
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Because that money's representing this whole not only our labor, but what our labor's producing, which is we're picking these vineyards.
Yeah, and
that's that whole situation.
And something to finish before we let the video finish, really quickly, just in the little clip we just saw, it's funny how they make the owner of the land white, and then the workers are a bunch of brown people,
brown guys, yeah,
and they call them laborers.
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was just funny. So yeah, we can just finish it off.
Is rooted in envy, something that he and the 10th of the 10 Commandments railed against. Most importantly, Jesus cared about helping the less fortunate. He never would have approved anything that undermines wealth creation. And the only thing...
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Yep.
That has ever created wealth and lifted masses of people out of poverty is free market capitalism. Read the New Testament. The plain meaning of the text is loud and clear. Jesus was not a socialist. He couldn't be. He loved people, not the state. I'm Lawrence Reed, president of the Foundation for Economic Education.
That's how you come to that conclusion, I guess.
And in a way, he's right. Jesus wasn't a socialist. He was a communist.
Yeah. He at the very least,
what's the point of money? We just need to do what we need for each other, and we'll all be good.
Yeah, he at the very least did not support the money system.
Well, yeah, God, Jesus and God rule over heaven, which is a moneyless, borderless society, which everybody's free to do what they would like, which is communism. And so, if heaven is communism, communism must be heaven on earth. So why would we not want to do communism?
It's true.
Yeah, heaven where everything is taken care of, and
classless, moneyless, borderless society.
We don't even have to let the rest of this. I just want to touch on a couple. His organization.
Yeah,
to give you an idea of how there's obviously you can smell his bias from a mile away, but the FEE, which, if I'm not mistaken, claims to be the oldest free market think tank in the United States. You have that. And then can you actually scroll down in that event section? They have an event section. Click on the Radicals and Revolutionary tab they have there.
Where is it?
It says webinars, radicals and revolutionaries, justice, equality in America.
The first one there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so listen to this. Keep in mind C.S. Lewis was a controversial figure, but read what they say about him there. It says, join fee for an online discussion featuring Dr. David Bob, 2 first names, Bill of Rights Institute, Joseph LeConte, the Heritage Foundation. Keep in mind, these are all right-wing think tanks. And moderator Tiki Coleman, FEE, exploring a crucial moment in American history involving 2 historical radical revolutionaries. See how they're painting themselves to draw on maybe someone that is younger and is experiencing this radical moment. But look what they say here. They about Frederick Douglass and C.S. Lewis. Douglass was born into slavery and escaped to become an esteemed orator and fiery abolitionist. Nothing about his critiques about the capitalist class.
Yeah.
Lewis was once disillusioned with Western ideals, but eventually became a great defender of Judeo-Christianity against communism, fascism, and totalitarianism.
Ultimate socialist or ultimate centrist, bro.
Which C.S. Lewis wasn't some ultimate radical, but they're just C.S. Lewis at the time was like supporting the World War II, and they're using that as, oh well, he's against communist and you know they're all the same. He's pro Judeo-Christian values, and they have some other ridiculous shit too. Like they have a book that guy wrote a whole book off that video, or that video was off a book he wrote, and yeah, just insane. Like he's their founder, and I think he's worth 6 figures. The company said something about their assets is worth like. They have like $8 million in assets. So just give you an idea of what kind of charitable organization this is. These guys.
This is at the same time, like PragerU, the CEO of like the founder of PragerU, like isn't even a Christian. Like he doesn't give a fuck about this shit.
No.
Like.
Wait, hold on. Does it look like the birds are like flying down and forming the chain fence?
The chains, yeah, that's what they're trying to do, yeah. Oh yeah.
You're breaking away from the chains.
They're trying to do it the other way, but the reality is they're doing it the other way.
Very, very misleading.
Do you have can you pull up the book tab, Carlos? So that cover is unironically hard as fuck. The cross with the like communist fucking shadow. Yeah, it's got a hammer and sickle. Like that is hard, bro. I fuck with that. That'd be a cool tattoo, honestly. But we can move on from this. I thought it was just a funny video. Ian actually brought the video. And
yeah.
It was pretty funny. Yeah, they're IRS 501 tax exempt. So all these things they claim, what a piece of shit.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to get into our last break. And when we come back, we're going to clean up the show and let you guys get the fuck out of here. So we'll be right back.
We don't have too much left, and it's important.
Yeah, we'll be right back after this break. 1 song. Go get your water. Go stretch out. We'll be right back. Be right back, folks. Howdy.
We are back.
What's good?
We are back.
We are back.
It's time to wrap this goddamn thing up.
Let's do it. I know our trend has been to keep them shorter, but this being a long one, I feel like we've got a lot off. Like we've gone through quite a bit, so let's just keep that going. So an old story we covered and a big story is when, as we all know, Jeremy Corbyn was suspended by the Labour Party, and the Labour Party made even further, moves to prevent people from, local groups of, Labour parties to make moves to try to reinstate him or, back out to exert their own power. All that was resisted. And now we've seen even another increase. Jewish socialist Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi, she has now been suspended from the Labour Party, which is disgusting. And let's play a minute of this video, and then we'll talk on it for another minute.
Not a proper Jew, the wrong sort of Jew.
This is her, by the way.
Self-hating Jew. I was called that for the first time when I was 19 years old at university, where I made a speech in defense of a pro-Palestinian motion. And it was in the Jewish Telegraph. And they front-paged it, this self-hating Jew. She must hate herself when she looks in the mirror. I was 19 years old. I've had people phone me up and say, we're going to put you in a wheelchair. We know where you are. We're outside your door. Probably the worst incident was when I was with my sister at a meeting about anti-Semitism with all Jews on the panel. And people were shouting at us, capos, capos.
You're called traitor Jews, capos.
Capo was a Jewish inmate of a concentration camp who collaborated with the authorities. We're talking people who collaborated in annihilation of their own people. So it's a pretty bad thing to be called. And it's Jews calling other Jews. Not nice. As a Jew on the left, who is intensely anti-racist and intensely aware of what anti-Semitism is and how dangerous it is, to be called an anti-Semite oneself is about as low as it gets. It's a bit like being accused of paedophilia or something. I cannot really think of anything worse. And it undermines the fight against real anti-Semitism. This is one of the most frightening things for me. People have been weaponizing accusations of anti-Semitism for political ends. The fact that that is going on seriously undermines and endangers our chances of dealing with genuine anti-Semitism, which is a real threat in our society. One of the biggest problems we face.
Carlos.
It shows they don't care.
They don't, exactly, because there is a real threat of anti-Semitism. And we remember, and that was video of it, of the Charleston fucking riots, let's call those riot, or mob, when they were, going through there with tiki torches and shit. They were saying shit like blood and soil and like death to Jews.
And Jews will not replace us. They were reciting the 14 words.
Right. But yet fucking the people that are being claimed as these anti-Semites and actions actually being taken against them, they're being removed from the Labour Party, are people like this, like Naomi, she has incredible character. She should, at 19, she was fighting for the Palestinian struggle, and they put in the Jewish paper that she was a self-hating Jew. And from that day on, she's experienced, this is nothing new. Every day has been an attack in this vein, and to still have the character, just look at who they're attacking. Like these, same with Jeremy Corbyn. Like Jeremy Corbyn has been standing up for Palestinians since the 70s, if not before, maybe like the 60s even. And fucking look, they smear him as an anti-Semite, and they kick him out of the Labour Party, and it's just fucking insane.
Yeah.
And we have some more gross stuff from Israel. And I think it's always good, like, to ground these things, because we'll talk about, the threat of anti-Semitism and also the misuse of anti-Semitism, like in this, to threaten the left and use it as a means of censorship, etc. But it's always good to just go straight to, hey, it's not about, and this is why they're suspending those members, but let's focus on Israel, the apartheid state of Israel, that regardless of what you think, look at what they're doing right now. They're every day is fucking massacre. It's disgusting.
we're gonna get into it right now. So I have this article here from Tamara Nassar. She is a Jordanian reporter who spends a lot of time in Gaza and the West Bank and etc. She writes for the Electronic Intifada, and the Intifada is a pro-Palestinian movement against apartheid Israel. Starting at the top, obviously reads, Israel kills child and then lies. Starting off at the top. What crime did 15-year-old Ali Ayman Saleh Nasser commit to be killed by occupation soldiers? Observing a protest, apparently. Israeli forces fatally shot Nasser in the stomach in the central West Bank village of Al-Mughayar on Friday during a protest against Israeli land theft in the area. Nasser was reportedly not participating in the demonstration when he was killed. All he did was watch, according to field investigations by Defense for Children International Palestine, the DCIP. The child was taken into a private car to the entrance of a nearby village. From there, an ambulance took him to the Palestine Medical Complex in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah. He was pronounced dead shortly afterward. Nasser is the sixth Palestinian child in the occupied West Bank to be killed by Israeli forces this year. The next section is entitled Kill and Lie. As in many other cases when occupation forces kill a Palestinian child, the Israeli military lied about what happened. The army denied using live fire during the Friday protests, according to Tel Aviv Daily Haaretz. The military spokesperson insisted the soldier using rubber-coated steel bullets and U.S.-made Ruger rifles, because, of course, there is no apartheid Israel, of course, without the United States pumping fucking money into it. But Israel's claims that the Ruger rifles do not fire live ammunition is an outright lie. These guns fire live bullets, albeit smaller 22 caliber rounds. They're nonetheless lethal. And to the right, there's a picture of Ali Nasser, rest in peace, his soul. During the second Intifada that began in 2000, the head of Israel's Army Operations Directorate ruled that the Ruger cannot be considered a non-lethal weapon and may be used only in circumstances that justify live fire. B. Tselem stated in 2015, which is the head of the Israeli Army Operations. In view of the large number of people hit and even killed by O-22 bullets early in the second Intifada, use of this ammunition was suspended from 2001 to 2008, the human rights groups added. Tselem began documenting Israel's sharply increased use of 22 caliber rifles against unarmed Palestinian protesters in 2015. DCIP confirmed that Nasser was killed by live fire. The group also confirmed that the Israeli soldiers used sponge-tipped rounds and tear gas grenades against protesters. Israeli forces also fired rubber-coated steel bullets, injuring 4 other Palestinians during demonstrations, Haaretz reported. While Israel claims the rubber-coated bullets, sponge-tipped rounds, and tear gas are also non-lethal, they have indeed killed and severely injured many Palestinians, including children. And then here just reads a tweet just describing what happened. And that's pretty much all I wanted to go into the article, because it really just describes what's really going on in the territories of the West Bank, etc., and the continued oppression of the Palestinian people by the apartheid Israel state, and how outright they go to lie about it, cover it up.
Well, the most obvious lie is they say, "Oh, we're being non-lethal," when they're using guns to fire ammunition, even though it's just toned down, but it still has a lot of killing potential.
You're still using a tool that was designed specifically. You're using a tool that was designed specifically to murder. A gun that serves no other purpose than to kill or subdue something.
And
so,
from like a lot of coverage, if you're listening, you should check out Empire Files. Abby Martin, they do good stuff. But like knowing the West Bank, that's set up where a lot of these protests happen. They go and protest at the wall, so keep in mind there's a wall. Then there's like a multi-mile dead zone virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another wall, and then there's effectively another dead zone, and then you begin to enter like outer Israel territories, right? So there's that, basically. They're over here, and then the protesters are over here. So they're in no way a threat at all. And the military, they're about here. So they're not even by the wall over here most of the time. So when they're shooting little kids, it's not, most of the time it's not like, because yes, they are just throwing tear gas and shooting rubber bullets at protesters. But a lot of times when they kill people, it's not an accidental killing. Someone's looking through a scope a mile away, and and they shot him. That's what happened.
There wasn't an accidental misfire.
No,
they're just
troopers. It wasn't a spray. They looked this kid in the eye through a scope and killed a little kid.
And pulled the trigger, shot him in the stomach, and he died before, shortly after arriving at a hospital. So disgusting. Solidarity with the Palestinian people.
And they learn their techniques at lying just like us. They know how to disguise their military aggression as humanitarian compassion.
Yeah, I mean, they learned from us, man.
And because the whole time they're acting like they're doing good for the Palestinians,
right?
In all this.
Yeah, oh yeah. And like the bright spot here, though, the good thing, if there is one, is keep in mind, like a couple years ago, you had those massive protests in Gaza, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're fucking. Maybe we should do a thing on that too. Like fucking hundreds of protesters were killed in a matter of like a week, and people were getting their legs and arms blown off, and there's a massacre. And to see people still going out and protesting, and little kids, 15, that would have been very little when that happened a couple of years ago, but they're now going out and watching protests. It's still like, damn, the Palestinian spirit can't be beaten down.
No, it's beautiful to see. Like you said,
as horrible as it is, yeah.
If there's anything you can take away from this disgusting, repressive apartheid state of Israel, it's how strong real change is, and how unbreakable the spirits of the Palestinian people are.
Yeah. Anyone have any final thoughts on? I guess this is our Israel section, so.
No, I'm ready to continue on this.
So I just remember Netanyahu congratulated Joe Biden.
Netanyahu.
Modi
and Netanyahu's not even, as Eian was describing, there's like these, or Carlos too, how they claim to help the Palestinians. That is the liberal class in Israel. Netanyahu's not even the far right, but Netanyahu fucking talks about it like they gotta remove them, like they're a plague.
Yeah, he talks like some extermination level.
And think he's not even the far. If they go farther right, there's people that talk about them like literally like the Arab or scum that should have been removed.
Like they're just not human. They're not human. Yeah. They shouldn't exist.
Because like Netanyahu's things like they shouldn't exist here, but if they go live in Iraq, that's fine. That's where Arabs should go. But like fuck the further right from him is like, well, we should just kill them all.
It's probably just as bad, if not worse, than racism is here.
Yes. I was just about to bring an at-home example.
But just like racism here, that whole coalition they all work together to the same end, and that is the repression of the Palestinian people.
With our help.
Yes. Yeah. Just like here, with our help, all of these different parts of the political class all come together to repress us. There's different gradients. Sorry, yeah.
No, it's okay. I was just going to bring up like an at-home example we can use of this same type of anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian sentiment is Ben Shapiro, who is openly called for the removal of Palestinians.
Bombing of them.
Yeah,
as well, yeah.
He just openly called for the killing of them, and also the mosque shooter in his manifesto referenced Ben Shapiro and other far-right figures like Ben Shapiro. So, like you said, they're all working to the same goal, and that is the continued oppression and repression of the Palestinian people.
They also, and this is discussion we'll continue to have, is they also all come together, these various parts of the political class and what one might call the deep state. They come together to do the grand old censoring. And I like this next video because it's an interview with Glenn Greenwald and Snowden. And Snowden is always refreshing to hear because obviously he's had to talk about this topic most of his adult life now, virtually every day. And it's also become, like in the situation with Assange also, he had to know about it out of necessity to survive, to live. This is all this guy is talks about, thinks about, reads about, writes about. And just an interesting side note, right after this interview, like a day or two later, Snowden made a tweet that's like, he does this often, he's like, President Trump, like, if you do anyone clemency, let it be Julian Assange, which is really cool to see him, like, knowing his own situation. And he needs clemency too. The dude's been stranded in a country he wasn't born in and doesn't want to be in. He would rather be here.
Even though he's not in quite a desperate situation as Assange, but yeah. Still.
Yes, but still, he's like, hey, like, he knows the importance of this issue and what they're doing to Assange, and he's like, he's such an inspirational figure in so many ways. Yeah, let's just play the interview and let it play out, because I think it's a real interesting dialogue.
Joining me now to further explore these ongoing and emerging debates around internet freedom, Silicon Valley censorship, various issues regarding press freedom is NSA whistleblower
His house
and
looks much
president
nicer in the
of
light.
Freedom of the Press Foundation, Edward Snowden. Ed, welcome back to System Update, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
No, it's so good to be with you. I'm glad to see you again, Glenn. How are you?
Doing great. Good to see you as well. So, as you, of course, know, and people are well aware of, there is a lot of debate at the moment about the necessity and the danger of censorship, online censorship, principally by Silicon Valley giants like Facebook, Google, and Twitter. The argument I often make as I write about it is that I view it as being very similar to a lot of the work that you and I did together back in 2013, 2014, and the years after that concerning NSA spying on the internet, because to me, I see it as the similar cause, which is internet freedom. How is it that you see the current debate about Silicon Valley censorship, and do you see it as part of that initial cause that led you to become the whistleblower the world knows you as today?
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget the context, that if you look back at what happened in 2013, one of the very first stories that was revealed was this idea of the PRISM program, right? And it was this top secret NSA slide that had all of these different corporate logos on it, and it was the biggest companies on the internet. And what the story behind it was that in secret, these companies had all agreed to work with the U.S. government far beyond what the law required of them. And that's what we're seeing with this new censorship push, is really a new direction in the same dynamic. These companies are not obligated by law to do almost any of what they're actually doing, but they're going above and beyond to, in many cases, increase the depth of their relationship and the government's willingness to avoid trying to regulate them in the context of their desired activities, which is ultimately to dominate the conversation and information space of global society in different ways. They may be doing this in order to sell you ads. They may be doing this to try to gain influence over you, and that's really what advertising is. They're trying to make you change your behavior in order to buy this or that you wouldn't have bought before, whether it was because you didn't know about this product or because it was you wouldn't have been interested in making this purchase until they tell you about it. But it goes into all of these different things as these companies become more complex and their behaviors become more complex. Their ambitions become increasingly great. And I think it's important to recognize that there are things that these companies can do that are reasonable. There are kinds of speech, even under the First Amendment, that are not protected legally in the United States. But they're very narrow exceptions, and we see a lot of the censorship that's occurring today go far beyond that.
I remember back in Hong Kong, one of the very first conversations we had when I was asking you about your motives for sacrificing your liberty and potentially your life in order to make the public aware of what was being done to the internet in secret, largely. And you explained to me your early experiences with the internet, which I think a lot of people, particularly people younger than both you and I, am a little younger than you, but we're essentially the same age, but people younger than you may not be aware of, because they were born into an internet that was very controlled and very corporatized and very regulated. So can you talk about those early years of the internet, what it was that it represented to those who believed, as you've told me, and the world you believed was such an innovative promise? What is it? What were those values that made it so exciting?
Well, this is in the very first chapter of my book, Permanent Record. So I don't read from it directly. The thing is, the internet that I remember, the early internet, was creative and cooperative. Everybody chose their own names. There were no real, true identity rules like they have on Facebook now. There was no know your customer requirements or regulations we have today, where like to create an account anywhere that has anything to do with money, you've got to like take a picture of yourself holding your passport. And so what this meant was everybody who was there, they chose their own face. And there was a lot of argument. There was a lot of, conflict. But the only people who were there by choice. No one was there by necessity. Nobody needed to be on the internet to get a job back then. And there wasn't a lot of commerce happening on the internet. Now, what happened was that crazy, chaotic, again, creative and cooperative space became increasingly a commercial and competitive space as companies moved in, as governments moved in, as institutions, small and large, began to try to make this a space less for the individual and more for them. And this is what we saw happen. We saw the internet move from a largely decentralized space where every website that you went to was one that somebody, made themselves, which was small and crude and ugly, but it was original and human, to something that was increasingly centralized, where you didn't have an email account on a server that you made. You had an email account from Google. And then everybody had an email account from Google. And then anybody who wants to send an email to anyone, even if you don't have a Google account today, like a Gmail account, the people that you're corresponding with have Gmail accounts. And so soon we see this small group of companies gain more and more insight to everybody's lives. Because, for example, in that context of email, even if your email is held on your server, right? It's completely private, it's completely secure. You set it up yourself right now today, right? Following best practices. If you're sending a copy of it to somebody who has Gmail, Google has a copy of it. And this is what happens is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of these guys, whether we're talking about public posts and public comments, even in private accounts or things that are hidden, or things that are supposed to be private, like direct messages, are increasingly visible to these companies. And so they know everything about us. At the same time, they work in very secretive ways. And they have very little due process, right? If your YouTube account gets taken down or, canceled for whatever reason, you can't do anything about it. If your Gmail account gets shut down or banned or blocked, literally right now, there's nothing you can do about it because you're not a Google customer. They don't have a customer service line for you. They have it for advertisers, but not for the people who actually use their services.
So the argument that is always made when it comes to those advocating for greater regulations and restrictions on speech or privacy is that there's some threat posed to us physically or to our way of life, which things like surveillance and censorship are necessary in order to guard us against. During the Cold War, it was the threat of communism. After 9/11, it was the threat of Islamic extremism. And now in the hands of the Democratic Party and American liberalism and the new administration that seems like they're going to be in power as of January 20th, the argument is, well, there's a new fascist movement of white supremacist domestic terrorism sweeping the United States. And in order to guard against that, we need to make sure that they can't use the internet to freely communicate their ideas, their dangerous ideas, that they can't speak on the internet in order to organize. We need to make certain that we're spying on them and keeping close tabs and monitoring them. As somebody who, first of all, worked inside the security state and various agencies within it, can you shed a little bit of light on what tactics are used to try and get people to acquiesce to these greater powers? And what specifically is your view of the argument I just outlined?
You know, one of the most interesting things, like how do you get these companies to play ball? Is it simply through business? The government is a customer of all of the major cloud service providers. I just saw in the last week a headline that said the CIA is awarding a new cloud contract now for those who haven't been keeping score. The last cloud contract for the CIA went to Amazon. This new cloud contract is going to Amazon and Microsoft and Google and every major cloud provider. There's like 5 cloud providers in the US, and all of them magically got a piece of this contract. And this is how they do it. You know, when the government is a major spender, when they're a major customer, when they are also your regulator, you as a company have every incentive to do what they want. And we're not talking here about the political part of government, right? These companies, they live with Democrats, they live with Republicans because they live for more than 8 years at a time. And so for them, what they're making a relationship is what's commonly called the deep state, not in the conspiratorial sense, but what I mean is the administrative state, the bureaucrats, the people that work at senior but working levels of government, and even policy levels of government, but they aren't political levels of government, where it's political appointees who basically get washed out every time the administration changes parties. These people are in charge of contracting. These people are in charge of institutional relationships. These people have those golden Rolodexes that means when they retire, they go and they work for Booz Allen or Lockheed Martin or Dell or Amazon or Google. And if you look today at any one of these major companies, they are hiring people who come from the CIA, who come from the Pentagon, who come from the NSA. Who have top secret clearances, and in no case is this more clear than Amazon, which again runs half the internet on their Amazon Web Services platform, where they appointed Keith Alexander. He was director of the National Security Agency under Barack Obama, and he was really one of the senior architects of the mass surveillance program that courts have repeatedly now declared to be unlawful and likely unconstitutional. When you have this kind of incentive from a private industry to maintain the warmest possible relationships with the people in government who not just buy from you, but also have the possibility to end your business or change the way you do business or impose costs on you, you now see this kind of soft corruption that happens in a constant way, where they literally hire people from government to come work for them, and then when the parties in the White House change to become more favorable, they send them back, right? They release the fish that they caught back in the river to go home back to these agencies, and then pay these companies back for their patronage. And this revolving door system is famous. It's happened throughout U.S. history. And as you said, these moral panics about what particularly are we saying is the speech crisis. Is it communism? Is it a new fascism? Is it Nazism? Whatever. This is constantly changing, but the tactics are always the same.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, in all those cases, right? There were actually communists in the United States in the 1940s and 50s who believed in revolution. There really was Islamic extremism in the wake of 9/11. There really are white supremacists or fascists or whatever you want to call them in the United States. Now, the question always is, what is the actual magnitude of that threat and what authoritarian measures are justified in its name? And along those lines, I wanted to ask you because, as you know, one of the primary arguments we encountered during the work being done on the archive you provided to the world about the threat posed by mass surveillance was this idea of, well, as long as I'm not a terrorist or a pedophile or a dangerous criminal, I really have nothing to hide. and therefore don't really care about the right to privacy. And one of the most effective responses to that was one that came from you, a kind of very pithy response, where you linked it to freedom of speech by saying that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is like saying you don't care about the right of free speech because you have nothing to say. I want to ask you a little bit about that free speech part of that equation, because one of the arguments that I think people are making now is, look, as long as this online censorship, this corporate regulation from Silicon Valley, for whatever motives they might have, as long as it's being done to people like Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos and racists and neo-Nazis, not only am I okay with it, but I'm actually good with it. I mean, of course, I'll start objecting if they really start censoring people with whom I agree, or even myself, but since they're not really doing that now, since it seems confined to these kind of misfits and extremists who are driven by hate, not only am I okay with it, I'm happy about it, because the world's a better place when we don't have to hear from them and they have no platform. Why is that a misguided way of thinking, if you think it is?
Well, again, I think it's what we're missing is not who the speaker is and what their beliefs are. It needs to be about what they're actually saying. Are we talking about an intentional call to violence that creates an imminent threat? Well, that's already not protected under U.S. law, right? You could go to jail for that kind of incitement. But what's interesting is that the people who are expressing concern about these kind of threats, they're not suing. They're not taking these people to court. Instead, they're going to companies. And they're pressuring companies to remove these people, largely not because of what they've said in the narrow sense, but because of the beliefs that they believe this speech represents. And this is really popular because a lot of these people are terrible people, right? But that's how it always works. That's the same way government passes new laws that violate our rights writ large. They shop around for the best possible case of the worst possible person. This is, for example, why you see laws that are trying to do things like outlaw encryption are always targeted towards things like child pornographers. Now, child pornographers are not terrorist masterminds. These guys aren't building, enormous scientific systems. They're not pushing the bleeding edge of technology. But everyone in the world is against people who abuse children, right? So if you can then take this small group of worst people in the world and use them as a wedge to go, if you don't give us X concession, then Y terrible thing will happen. Your children will be abused, or people will come to harm as a result of the things this person is saying, and so on and so forth. In all of these cases, even in the context of terrorism, we're talking about very marginal community. The corpus of terrorists around the world is very small. And one of the interesting things, even in the context of mass surveillance, is whenever there is a terrorist attack, and the day after reporting starts happening, where they call the police chief, they call the intelligence chiefs, and they're like, what happened? How did this get through? And they always, sort of turn their pockets out and go, oh, we actually already knew about these guys. They were on our radar, but we didn't do anything about them. And it's this kind of thing where they go, oh.
Yeah, so I think I would encourage, we did watch like almost half, but the other half is really good too, in the interview. But the distinction he made, it was just a way of thinking about it. I hadn't completely thought about it in this way. He's like, yeah, there is a court process for speech that is not, you can't threaten somebody to kill somebody, etc. But point is, that's not, these companies are trying to get like a back door, a back key, so that they don't have to even go, because they could go through that court process and do something about it. But rather than do that, they're going completely back door, which shows that, and his point of bringing up all those NSA people and CIA people rotating throughout government and these private, military contractors, etc., and policymaking positions is, yeah, they set themselves up like that on purpose. The NSA controls these different companies now, with Amazon specifically. And it's crazy. Yeah, our boss, but maybe not for too long. We might be News Corp.
The very last point he brought up was actually very interesting. And and it's like how he's like like the last like example he brought up is like, oh, we knew about this for this amount of time. Like we knew 9/11 was gonna happen. And these other terrorist attacks, the information was there, but they just did nothing about it.
Didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. And he was, before that even, is like, well, really the thing is terrorism writ large is not really a threat.
Yeah, exactly. And
regardless.
And that's tied to other issues. That's tied to our foreign policy.
Yeah.
Like 9/11 is a result of our foreign policy.
Absolutely.
And the destabilization in the Middle East as a whole is part of our foreign policy, which is creating that kind of terrorism. But there's also very marginal white supremacist terrorism here in the United States. But yeah, that was
that was our last video. But Snowden's always very he takes usually a lot of time to make a point, but I like in the
he makes the point well.
Yeah, like he did outline like, hey, this is how these different, the intelligence state and the security state and these different private companies, there's this revolving door, and at the same hand they're claiming they're trying to do, we want to prevent hate speech, etc. But the reality is they're getting a back door, and hey, look at the interest they're really serving over here. And he always keeps his nose to it too. He doesn't get caught up in anything. So yeah, solidarity to him too. Full pardon. So
of course.
Bring him home. He's having a baby too.
Yep.
Which is cool. I know for a long time I don't know if it's his wife now, but his girlfriend wasn't allowed to come to. Yeah, I don't think they saw each other for years probably. So. Does anyone have any? We had a long one here. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we play a little Michael Parenti to get us out of here?
No, I mean I think we had a really good show. Even though it was a long one, is I think productive. We got through a lot.
Record length.
Yeah, record length, and I think it was cool that we covered. It was cool that we covered a lot of topics.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess if nobody else has anything to add, we're the Spoop Podcast. We're here every Wednesday and Sunday at 10:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in California. If you liked what you saw, please go ahead and drop a follow. And if you're watching without an account, if you don't remember creating an account, please create one and drop a follow. You'll be able to turn on notifications so you never miss a live show. If you have an Amazon Prime account, you can connect it to your Twitch and you get a free Amazon Prime sub. It costs you literally nothing, and it helps us in the statistics and analytics of Twitch. That's all the little shameless plugs I'll do. Besides, go check out our Twitter and Instagram at Spoop Podcast. Our YouTube is where we have all the archives. Just look up Spoop Podcast, you'll find us. Thank you guys so much for watching. We have 6 people here at 1:14 in the morning where we live, so it's super cool. We're working on SoundCloud. We're editing all that shit, and
appreciate the people who watch after too. You guys are cool. Also,
you guys are badass. Our first episode's at the brink of 200 views or something.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's really cool. So yeah, thank you guys again. Workers of the world unite, and we're the Spoop Podcast, and we'll see you guys on Wednesday, 10:30.
Before we go, our outro here is going to be an ardent critic of U.S. imperialism, Dr. Michael Parenti, and I think he's going to speak for all of us here. What our thoughts on those who criticize revolution generally are, and why we support revolution.
Yeah. Yellow Parenti gang. Let's get out
Yellow
of here.
Parenti.
We'll talk to you guys. Enjoy this.
So you compare a country to what it came from, with all its imperfections, and those who demand instant perfection. The day after the revolution, they get up and say, are there civil liberties for the fascists? Are they going to be allowed to have their newspapers and their radio program? Are they going to be able to keep all their farms? The passion that some of our liberals feel the day after the revolution, the passion and concern they feel for the fascists, the civil rights and civil liberties of those fascists who were dumping and destroying and murdering people before. Now the revolution has got to be perfect. It's got to be flawless. Well, that isn't my criteria. My criteria is what happens to those people who couldn't read. What happens to those babies that couldn't eat, that died of hunger? And that's why I support revolution. The revolution that feeds the children gets my support. Not blindly, not unqualifiedly. And the Reaganite government that tries to stop that kind of process, that tries to keep those people in poverty and illiteracy and hunger, that gets my undiluted animosity and opposition. So that was my answer to you. Let's not judge these countries by some abstract model, but where they're coming from. So you can judge a socialist country, one, by what it's replacing. Two, you can judge it